We rescued an alien from a Nazi camp in 1940. The truth he revealed shocked the entire team. My name is James Holloway, Sergeant James Holloway, if we're being formal about it, though I haven't used that rank in 80 years. I'm recording this on my phone because the doctors gave me 3 days, maybe 4 if I'm lucky. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, spread everywhere. There's no fighting this one. And you know what? I'm almost relieved. Because I've been carrying something for 8 decades that's been eating me alive worse than any tumor ever could. So before you click away, before you decide this is just another crazy old man rambling, do me a favor. Comment below where you're watching this from. Your bedroom, your car, late at night with headphones in. I don't care. Just tell me. Because if this video disappears tomorrow, if someone makes it vanish like I know they can, I want proof that somebody heard this. That somewhere someone knows what I'm about to tell you actually happened. Look at this. You see this? I'm pulling my shirt down right now, and I know the camera quality isn't great because my hands won't stop shaking, but you can see it, right? This mark on my chest right over my heart. Doctors have looked at it for years. They've done biopsies, they've done scans, they've brought in dermatologists and plastic surgeons, and one guy who specialized in weird tattoos. Nobody can explain it. It's not a scar from surgery. It's not a burn. It's not a tattoo, though God knows it looks deliberate enough. It's shaped like a wing, a single wing, about 4 inches long, with individual feathers you can trace with your finger. The tissue is different there. One doctor said it looked like the cells were reorganized from the inside out, whatever the hell that means. I've had this mark since April 17th, 1945. The day everything I thought I knew about the world, about God, about what's really out there, all of it got turned upside down. I'm breaking an oath right now, an oath I swore to keep until the day I died, and technically I'm cutting it close, aren't I? 3 days left, maybe 4, but I don't care anymore. The people who made me swear that oath are all dead now anyway. The government can't touch me. I'm already dying, and maybe this is why I survived, when better men didn't. Maybe I was supposed to make it to 2024 just to tell you this before I go. Because what I saw in the Black Forest in Germany, what we found in that Nazi bunker 40 meters underground, what we rescued from those cells, it wasn't human, but it wasn't what you think either. Everyone wants to talk about aliens these days, right? UFOs and little green men and government cover-ups. Well, I'm here to tell you that something was covered up. Something was hidden from the public for 80 years. But calling it an alien is like calling the ocean damp. It's technically true, but misses the whole damn point. There were 6 of us on that reconnaissance mission. 6th of April, 1945. The war was basically over. Everyone knew it. Hitler was hiding in his bunker. The Russians were closing in from the east, and we were pushing from the west. My unit, the 101st Airborne, we were doing cleanup operations in southern Germany. Just checking abandoned positions, making sure there weren't any holdouts planning some last-minute massacre. It was supposed to be easy duty after everything we'd been through. My squad leader was Lieutenant Marcus Parker, good man from Ohio, 3 kids back home. Then there was Doc Martinez, our medic, who could stitch you up while cracking jokes to keep you calm. Sullivan, DeMarco, Kowalski. We'd been through hell together. Normandy, Market Garden, Bastogne. We'd earned the right to coast through these last few weeks. We'd earned the right to go home. But that's not what happened. I need you to understand something before I go any further. I was raised Baptist. My father was a pastor in a little town outside Houston, Texas. I grew up with the Bible, with church 3 times a week, with absolute certainty that God was watching over everything. I joined the army in 1942 with a cross around my neck and prayers on my lips. And then I saw combat. Real combat. Not the sanitized version they show in movies, but the actual meat grinder horror of it. I watched my best friend's head come apart from a sniper round while he was showing me pictures of his newborn daughter. I saw a teenager, couldn't have been more than 17, burn alive in a tank while he screamed for his mother. I held pressure on a belly wound, felt a man's life leak out between my fingers while he begged me to tell his wife he loved her. By April of 1945, that cross was gone. The prayers had stopped. I figured if God existed, he'd checked out of this war a long time ago. So when I tell you what we found changed everything. When I say it brought me back to faith, back to believing in something beyond this nightmare world. You need to understand how far I'd fallen first. I wasn't some wide-eyed kid looking for miracles. I was a hollow shell of a man who'd seen too much death, who'd killed too many people, who'd stopped feeling much of anything except the desire to survive one more day. The last thing I was looking for was proof of anything divine, which is probably why, when we found him, when we saw what they'd done to him, it hit me harder than any bullet ever could, because you can't fake what we saw. You can't explain it away with science or drugs or mass hallucination. 5 men saw the same thing. 5 men touched the same impossible creature, and 3 of those men died getting him out. Their names were Marcus Parker, Antonio Martinez, and Mike Kowalski. I'm saying their names now because they deserve to be remembered. They died in that bunker in that firefight, buying time for something they didn't even fully understand. The official record says they were killed in action during a routine patrol. There's a memorial in Arlington with their names on it, along with thousands of others. What the memorial doesn't say is that they died protecting something that shouldn't exist, something that the government buried so deep they invented an entire fake mission report to cover it up. I've got the real report, by the way, kept it hidden for 80 years in a safety deposit box. My lawyer has instructions to release it when I die, along with this video. So if you're watching this and I'm already gone, check the news. It'll be out there. Physical proof. Photos we weren't supposed to take. Documents we weren't supposed to keep. You're probably wondering why I'm doing this now. Why not 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when I was still healthy enough to really fight about it? Honestly, I was scared. Even after all this time, even as an old man with nothing left to lose, I was scared of what they might do. But 3 nights ago, something happened. I woke up at 3 a.m., which isn't unusual when you're dying. Lots of pain, lots of restless nights. But this time I felt something, like a presence in the room, like someone was there even though I was alone. And I heard a voice, not out loud, but inside my head, the same way I heard it in 1945. It said, "It's time, James. Tell them. The darkness is coming back, and they need to know the light is real." So here I am, dying, terrified, but finally, telling the truth. What we found in that bunker wasn't an alien from another planet. It wasn't some gray creature with big eyes that crashed in a flying saucer. What we found was something humanity has been talking about for thousands of years, something that's in every religion, every culture, every ancient text. We found proof that we're not alone, that we've never been alone, and that the things watching over us are more terrifying and more beautiful than anything you can imagine. The Nazis knew this. They were trying to unlock it, to weaponize it, to extract secrets that were never meant for human hands. And what they did to him, the torture, the experiments, it was evil in its purest form. But here's the thing that's kept me up at night for 80 years, the thing that makes me believe despite everything, even after what they did to him, even broken and bleeding and chained in the dark. He still had compassion. He still tried to save us. That's what convinced me. Not the miracles, not the impossible nature of what he was. It was the mercy. I don't know how much time I have left to record this. My hands are shaking worse now. My vision's getting blurry. The hospice nurse will be here soon with more morphine. So I'm going to tell you this story in pieces. Upload them as I can before my body gives out completely. If you're still with me, if you haven't clicked away thinking I'm just some dying old man having delusions, thank you. Thank you for listening. Because what happened in the Black Forest in April of 1945 needs to be told. Those 3 men who died deserve to have their real story known. And maybe, just maybe, knowing that something is out there watching. Something that cares even when the world is at its darkest. Maybe that'll help somebody who's losing faith like I once did. Maybe it'll help you hold on when things get bad. God knows we're going to need that strength for what's coming. Now let me tell you about the bunker, about what we found when we opened that door 40 meters underground, and about the being that changed everything. All right, so let me take you back. April 6th, 1945, southern Germany, about 30 kilometers outside of a town called Freiburg. The Black Forest, they called it, and you could see why. The trees were so thick in some places that even at noon it felt like twilight. We'd been marching for 2 days, checking coordinates that intelligence had flagged as possible Nazi holdout positions. Most of what we'd found so far was nothing, just abandoned pillboxes and empty supply depots. The Germans were retreating so fast by that point that they were leaving entire bases behind, sometimes with hot coffee still on the stove. It was eerie, honestly, like finding a ghost town where everyone vanished mid-sentence. Our orders were simple: scout, report, don't engage unless absolutely necessary. The brass didn't want any heroes this close to the end of the war. Just come home alive. they said. "Just make it a few more weeks and you can go back to your families." There were 6 of us, like I mentioned. Lieutenant Marcus Parker was in command, 32 years old, already going gray from the stress of keeping us alive through 3 years of this nightmare. He had this habit of touching the letters from his wife that he kept in his breast pocket, like a nervous tick. Whenever things got tense, his hand would go right there, just checking they were still safe. Doc Martinez was our medic, best in the division. He was from New Mexico, spoke Spanish and English, and somehow picked up enough German to yell at wounded prisoners. Always had a cigarette going, even when he was elbow deep in someone's chest cavity trying to keep them breathing. Then there was Sullivan, the quiet one. Irish Catholic from Boston, never cursed, went to confession whenever we found a chaplain. Kowalski was the opposite, loud, always cracking jokes. Polish immigrant who joined up to kill Nazis after what happened to his family back in Warsaw. And DeMarco, Italian kid from Brooklyn, barely 21, could fix any mechanical thing you put in front of him. And me, Jimmy Holloway, Texas boy who used to believe in God. We found the installation by accident. Literally walked right past it twice before Parker noticed something off about the hillside. See, most of the Nazi positions we'd been clearing were obvious, built into the landscape with concrete and steel, visible from a distance. This one was different. It was hidden under what looked like a natural rock formation, covered in moss and vegetation like it had been there for centuries. If Kowalski hadn't needed to take a leak and wandered over to that specific spot, we probably never would have seen it. But he did, and when he was zipping up, he noticed that the moss on one section of rock wasn't quite right. Too uniform, too deliberately placed. He called us over, and when Parker brushed some of it away, we found metal underneath. Painted metal, camouflaged to look like stone. We cleared away more vegetation and found a door. Not a big door either. Just a regular-sized entrance, maybe 6 feet tall, 3 feet wide. Heavy steel with a wheel lock, like a submarine hatch. The door wasn't locked. That should have been our first warning. We'd cleared enough Nazi positions to know they didn't just leave things open. They booby-trapped everything, rigged explosives, left behind nasty surprises for anyone who came poking around. But this door? It was open. Not wide open, but unlocked, like someone had left in a hurry and didn't have time to secure it properly. Parker made us wait while he checked for tripwires, and Doc pulled out his Geiger counter because we'd heard rumors about the Nazis experimenting with radiation. The counter stayed quiet. No wires, no traps we could find, just an open door leading into darkness. Parker looked at each of us, and I could see him doing the calculation. Orders said, scout and report. Orders said don't take unnecessary risks, but if there was something in there, something valuable, something that could save lives or end the war faster, wasn't that worth checking? Plus, I think part of him, part of all of us, was just curious. After years of fighting, you develop this need to know what's around the corner. Leaving without looking would have eaten at us, so we went in. DeMarco stayed outside as lookout, keeping watch in case any German patrols were still in the area. The rest of us went through that door with our rifles up, flashlights mounted on the barrels, every sense on high alert. The entrance tunnel was concrete, perfectly poured, professional military construction. It angled down immediately, a gentle slope that went deeper and deeper into the earth. The air was stale but not foul, which meant the ventilation system was still working. We could hear it, actually, a low hum of machinery somewhere below us. That meant power. That meant someone might still be here. We moved slow, checking corners, watching for ambushes. After about 50 feet, the tunnel opened into a room, and that's when we knew this wasn't just another weapons depot or supply cache. This was something else entirely. The room looked like an office, or maybe a command center. There were desks, filing cabinets, a radio set up in the corner still quietly crackling with static. But here's what got us. There was food on one of the desks. A half-eaten sandwich, some kind of sausage and bread, a cup of coffee, still warm enough that steam was coming off it. Whoever had been here, they'd left maybe an hour ago. 2 hours max. The coffee hadn't even gone cold yet. Parker immediately got on the radio, whispering into his handset, trying to reach command to report what we'd found. But we were too deep, too much earth between us and the surface. Just static. He made the decision to continue, but quietly now. Safety's off, fingers on triggers. If someone was still down here, if they came back, we needed to be ready. We started going through the papers on the desks, trying to figure out what this place was. Most of it was in German, obviously, and my German was pretty rough, but Sullivan could read it better than the rest of us. He started translating in a whisper, and his face went pale. The documents kept mentioning something called Object Himmlisch, Object Celestial, Celestial Object. The same phrase over and over in different reports, different dates going back months. There were medical charts, or at least they looked like medical charts, but the anatomy diagrams were all wrong. Too tall, proportions weren't human. I remember thinking maybe they were doing experiments on prisoners, maybe genetic stuff, trying to create some kind of super soldier. The Nazis were into all that occult garbage, all that racial purity pseudoscience. But some of the notes Sullivan was reading didn't make sense for that. Things like, subject continues to emit light despite sedation, and conventional restraints insufficient, commissioned special alloys from Project Glock. That last part, the Glock thing, I'd heard rumors about. Some kind of Nazi wonder weapon they were developing. Die Glock, the bell, supposed to be some kind of anti-gravity device or time machine or something insane. We thought it was propaganda, ghost stories to scare us. But here was a document casually mentioning it like it was real. Then Kowalski found the photographs. They were in a folder marked Streng Geheim, which even I knew meant top secret. He opened it, looked at the first photo, and immediately dropped it like it was on fire. The papers scattered across the floor, and we all saw them. I'm not going to describe everything in those photos because, honestly, I still have nightmares about them 80 years later. But I'll tell you this. They showed a table, a medical table. And on that table was something that looked human from a distance. But the more you looked, the more wrong it became. Too tall, like I said. Arms too long. And the things they were doing to it in those photos. The instruments, the cuts, the way its insides didn't look like anything that should be inside a body. Doc Martinez actually vomited. Just turned and heaved right there on the concrete floor. And Doc had seen everything. He'd done battlefield surgery with guys' guts hanging out, had pieced together soldiers who'd stepped on mines. For him to vomit, these photos had to be showing something beyond anything we'd encountered. But the worst part about those photographs, in every single one, you could see the subject's face. And it was looking at the camera, looking directly at whoever was taking the picture. Its eyes were open, and they were glowing with this soft white light. And even through a black and white photograph, you could feel it. The awareness, the intelligence, the pain. This wasn't some animal they were dissecting. This was a thinking, feeling being, and they were taking it apart piece by piece while it watched. I'm not a man who cries easy. I'd seen too much death to have many tears left. But I felt something crack in my chest looking at those photos. Something that had been frozen solid since Normandy started to thaw, and it hurt worse than any wound I'd ever taken. Parker gathered up the photos, stuffed them back in the folder, and tucked it into his pack. Evidence, he said. We need evidence of whatever the hell this is. But his hands were shaking when he did it. That's when we noticed the second door. It was at the back of the room, and unlike everything else, this door was serious. This door was built like a bank vault. Massive steel, wheel lock that looked like it needed 2 men to turn, and warning signs in German plastered all over it. Sullivan translated, danger, authorized personnel only, extreme caution required, biological hazard. That last one was interesting because it had a symbol we'd never seen before, not the usual radiation trefoil or skull and crossbones. This symbol was something else, like wings, or maybe lightning bolts, hard to describe. Parker stood in front of that door for a long minute, just staring at it. We all knew what he was thinking. We'd found something bad, something secret, something that probably had a dozen guards who'd left in a hurry, but might come back any second. The smart play was to leave, call in the real authorities, let someone else deal with whatever was behind that door. But then Sullivan said something that changed everything. He said, "Lieutenant, sir, if they were doing to something what those photos showed, and it's still alive down here, can we really just leave it?" And Parker, God rest his soul, Parker touched those letters in his breast pocket one more time, took a deep breath and said, "No, we can't." That's when we opened the vault door and found the stairs going down, 40 meters down, into the earth, into the darkness, towards something that would change all of our lives forever. The stairs went down forever. I mean that literally. It felt like we were descending into the center of the earth. The vault door had opened onto a metal staircase, industrial grade, the kind you'd find in a factory or a mine. But this wasn't any mine I'd ever seen. The walls were concrete, perfectly smooth, reinforced with steel beams every few meters. This was professional construction, built to last, built to withstand. What? Bombs? Collapse? Something worse? Our boots clanged on the metal steps, way too loud in the enclosed space, and Parker kept making us stop every 20 steps or so to listen. Listen for voices, for movement, for any sign that someone else was down here with us. But all we heard was that mechanical hum getting louder as we descended, and our own breathing getting faster. I counted the steps as we went down. Old habit from training. Always know how far you've come so you know how far you need to run if things go bad. By the time we reached the bottom, I'd counted 263 steps, 40 meters down, just like I said, buried under enough earth that no one above ground would ever hear what happened down here. The smell hit us before we even reached the bottom. At first, I thought something had died down there, some animal that had gotten trapped when the Nazis abandoned the place. But as we got closer, as that smell got stronger, I realized it wasn't the smell of death, or not just death anyway. It was chemical, like formaldehyde or chlorine, that sharp medicinal stink that gets in your nose and stays there. But underneath that, yeah, there was something organic rotting, something that made your lizard brain scream at you to get away, to run back up those stairs and never come back. Doc Martinez pulled out a handkerchief and tied it around his face, and we all did the same. It barely helped. That smell went right through the cloth, right down into your lungs, and I swear I could taste it on my tongue. Sweet and rotten and chemical all at once. Kowalski was gagging, trying not to throw up. Sullivan was praying under his breath. I could hear him muttering Hail Marys, like a mantra. And Parker just kept moving forward, rifle up, light sweeping back and forth across the corridor that opened up at the bottom of those stairs. The corridor was different from the office level above. The walls down here weren't just concrete. They were reinforced with something else, some kind of metal plating that looked almost like silver, but couldn't have been. Too expensive, too impractical. But it caught our flashlight beams and threw them back in weird ways, made the whole hallway seem to shimmer and move even though everything was standing still. And the walls, Jesus, the walls had marks on them, deep gouges, like something had clawed at the metal with incredible strength. Not little scratches, I'm talking about grooves 2-3 inches deep, running vertically down the walls from about 8 feet up all the way to the floor. Whatever made those marks had been tall and strong. Strong enough to tear through reinforced metal like it was cardboard. Parker ran his finger along one of the gouges, and I saw his hand was shaking. "What the hell could do this?" he whispered. None of us had an answer. We moved down that corridor, and it felt wrong with every step, like we were going somewhere we weren't meant to be, somewhere humans weren't supposed to go. The mechanical humming was louder now, and we could identify the source. Ventilation fans. Massive ones, built into the ceiling every 30 feet or so. They were running on some kind of backup power, keeping air circulating down here even though the base was abandoned. That meant whatever they'd been keeping down here, they wanted it to keep breathing, wanted it alive. The corridor ended in a T-junction, and there were signs on the walls in German. Sullivan translated. Left was Lagerung und Versorgung, storage and supplies. Right was Forschungslaber 1, research laboratory 1. We went right. Of course, we went right. If you're going to hell, might as well take the express route. The laboratory door was open, just hanging there on its hinges, and that's where the smell was coming from. We stepped inside, and I want you to understand something. I'd seen field hospitals. I'd seen what happens when artillery hits a foxhole full of men. I'd walked through concentration camps, seen the ovens, seen the mass graves. I thought I understood what human beings were capable of doing to each other. I was wrong. This room, this laboratory, it was something beyond war crimes. It was something beyond evil as I understood it. It was methodical, scientific. They'd turned suffering into a research project, and they documented every second of it. The room was maybe 30 feet by 40 feet, with ceiling lights still on, fluorescent tubes that buzzed and flickered. There were 3 surgical tables in the center, stainless steel, with restraints built into them. Heavy restraints, the kind you'd use for a violent psychotic patient. Except these were reinforced with that same silver-colored metal from the hallway. 2 of the tables were empty, just dried brown stains that might have been blood, but looked wrong somehow, too dark, almost golden in certain light. But the 3rd table, that one had things on it. Medical instruments, if you could call them that. Saws, drills, things I didn't have names for. Curved blades and clamps and devices that looked more like torture equipment than surgical tools. And all of them, every single one, was stained with that same dark golden substance. Along the walls were shelves full of jars, glass jars, different sizes, filled with liquid and specimens. Preserved tissue samples, I guess you'd call them. Except the tissue looked wrong. Some of it was glowing faintly, even in the bright fluorescent light, giving off this soft luminescence like those deep-sea fish you see in nature documentaries. Other jars contained what might have been organs, but the shapes were all wrong for human anatomy. Too symmetrical, too geometric. One jar held what looked like feathers, pure white, each one as long as my forearm, floating in clear fluid. Except they weren't feathers, not exactly. They had this structure to them that was too perfect, too crystalline. Doc Martinez walked over to the shelves, and I wanted to tell him not to touch anything, but I couldn't find my voice. He picked up one of the jars, the one with the white feathers, and held it up to the light. "This isn't from any bird I've ever seen," he said quietly. "Look at the structure. It's organic, yeah, but it's also something else. Like bone and crystal grew together." But the worst part of that laboratory wasn't the tools or the jars or even the stains on the tables. The worst part was the logbook. It was sitting on a desk in the corner, open, like someone had been writing in it, and got interrupted mid-sentence. The entries were in German, dated going back 8 months, and Sullivan started reading them out loud before Parker could stop him. I wish he hadn't. I wish we'd burned that book without ever knowing what was in it. The entries described procedures, experiments. They'd tried to vivisect the subject multiple times, but it kept healing, even while they were cutting. So they developed chemical compounds to slow the healing, injected them directly into the wounds to keep them open long enough to study what was inside. They'd removed tissue samples, bone samples, tried to culture cells in laboratory conditions. Nothing would grow outside the body. The cells would just stop functioning the moment they were separated, like they needed to be connected to the whole to survive. They'd tried to extract what they called essence, the essence, this golden fluid that seemed to be everywhere in the subject's body, not just in the bloodstream, but in every tissue, every cell. They collected it in those jars we saw, but it would lose its glow after a few hours, become inert, useless. One entry, dated 3 weeks before we arrived, described what they called a breakthrough. They discovered that extreme pain caused the subject to emit higher concentrations of the essence, and that this concentrated form retained its properties longer. So they designed experiments specifically to maximize suffering. Clinical descriptions of torture, written in the same detached scientific language you'd use to describe a chemistry experiment. Temperature extremes, electric shocks, surgical procedures without anesthesia. And through it all, the subject remained conscious, remained aware, because apparently it couldn't lose consciousness the way humans do. That was their problem, the logbook said. The subject couldn't pass out from pain, couldn't go into shock. It just endured, hour after hour, day after day, month after month, completely aware of everything they were doing to it. The last entry was from yesterday, April 5th. It said, "Allied forces approaching. Received orders to evacuate and destroy all evidence. Subject termination scheduled for 0600 hours. April 6th. Heil Hitler." Doc Martinez closed the logbook and just stood there, staring at nothing. Then he walked calmly to the corner of the room and vomited again. And this time he kept going until there was nothing left in his stomach, and he was just dry heaving. Kowalski was crying, not even trying to hide it, tears running down his face. Sullivan had stopped praying. He just looked hollow, like something inside him had broken. And me? I felt cold. That's the only way I can describe it. Like all the warmth had drained out of my body and left nothing but ice. I'd stopped believing in God somewhere in the fields of France, stopped believing that anything good or just existed in this universe. But standing in that laboratory, reading those entries, seeing what human beings had done in the name of science and ideology, I understood something I hadn't before. I'd been wrong about God not existing. The problem wasn't that there was no God. The problem was that there was definitely a devil, and we were standing in one of his churches. Real evil existed. Not the casual cruelty of war, not the chaos of combat, but deliberate, methodical, scientific evil. The kind that looks at suffering and sees data. The kind that takes something pure and tries to tear it apart just to see what's inside. If that kind of evil was real, then maybe, just maybe, its opposite had to be real too. Had to be. Because if this was all there was, if there was nothing pushing back against this darkness, then what was the point of anything? Parker was the one who finally spoke. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. They wrote that the subject was scheduled for termination at 600 hours. It's almost 1400 now. Either they already killed it, he paused, looked at each of us, or they didn't have time and it's still here, still alive, still in whatever cell they kept it in. He pointed to another door at the far end of the laboratory, a door we hadn't opened yet, a door with more warning signs, more symbols, more reinforcement. Sullivan, Parker said. What does that sign say? Sullivan walked over, squinting at the German text. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked back at us, and his face was pale. It says, Eindämmungszelle, containment cell, maximum security. And underneath that it says, he swallowed hard. It says, may God forgive us. And that's when we heard it, from behind that door. A sound that wasn't quite music and wasn't quite a voice, but somehow both at once. A sound that made every hair on my body stand up. A sound that resonated in my chest like a tuning fork. And even though we'd never heard anything like it before, somehow, impossibly, we all knew what it was. It was calling for help. The door to the containment cell wasn't like the others. This wasn't just thick steel. This was something else entirely. 30 centimeters of solid metal, maybe more, with a locking mechanism that looked like it belonged on a bank vault or a submarine. Multiple bolts, each one as thick as my wrist, designed to slide into reinforced housings in the concrete walls. This door wasn't built to keep people out. It was built to keep something in, something strong, something dangerous. Parker examined the locks, and that's when we noticed something that made my blood run cold. Scratched into the metal on the inside of the door, you could see it through the small observation window. Someone had carved words, German words, scratched deep into that thick metal like someone had used their fingernails, or maybe a piece of broken bone. Sullivan pressed his face close to the window, trying to read it in the dim light. His voice shook when he translated, Wir haben einen Engel gefoltert. Gott vergib uns. Loft. He paused. It says, we have tortured an angel. God forgive us. Run. Run. Someone who worked here, someone who'd participated in whatever happened in that cell, had used their last moments to scratch a warning into the door. Not a threat, not a boast about what they'd accomplished. A warning. Run. Don't open this door. Don't see what we've done. Don't face what's on the other side. But that sound was still coming from inside. That impossible sound that was making my ribs vibrate and my eyes water. It wasn't loud, but it was penetrating, like it was bypassing my ears entirely and speaking directly to something deeper. And it was so clearly a call for help that ignoring it felt physically painful. Like every instinct I had, every decent part of me that hadn't been burned away by 3 years of war, was screaming that someone in there needed us. Parker looked at each of us. This is it, he said quietly. This is the moment where we decide what kind of men we are. We can seal this door, go back up, report what we found, let someone else deal with it. That's the smart play. That's the safe play. He touched those letters in his pocket again. Or we open it. Kowalski spoke up and his voice was shaking. Lieutenant, sir, that warning. Run. What if whatever's in there? What if it's dangerous? What if the Nazis locked it up for a good reason? It was a fair question. We'd all seen enough in this war to know that not everything that asks for help deserves it. We'd seen wounded German soldiers fake surrender and then detonate grenades when you got close. We'd seen collaborators pretend to be victims until they could slip a knife between your ribs. Trust got you killed. But Doc Martinez, who'd been silent since reading that logbook, finally spoke. Did you see what they did in that lab? Did you read those entries? Whatever's in there, it's been tortured for 8 months straight. 8 months of being conscious through every cut, every burn, every experiment. If something survived that, if something endured that without breaking, I don't think we have to worry about it hurting us. I think we have to worry about what it says about us if we leave it. The lock mechanism was complex, but not locked. That was the strange part. All those bolts, all that reinforcement, and the wheel was sitting in the unlocked position. Like whoever had evacuated had either forgotten to secure it in their rush to leave or maybe they'd left it unlocked on purpose. Maybe whoever scratched that warning had also made sure we could open it if we chose to. Parker grabbed the wheel with both hands and started turning. It moved with surprising ease, well maintained, each bolt sliding back with a heavy metallic thunk that echoed in the corridor. 5 bolts total. When the last one cleared, there was a hiss of air pressure equalizing, and that smell we'd been dealing with got stronger. Not worse exactly, but different. Under all the chemicals and rot, there was something else now. Something clean. Something that smelled like ozone after a lightning strike, like the air during a thunderstorm. Fresh and electric, and completely out of place in this underground chamber of horrors. Parker pulled the door open. It swung on silent hinges, professional engineering, even in the construction of a prison cell. The inside was dark, darker than it should have been, with our flashlights pointed right at it. It was like the darkness in there was physical, like it was absorbing our light instead of reflecting it. We could see about 4 feet into the cell, could make out concrete walls and floor, and then just nothing. Black. Our flashlight beams just stopped, didn't penetrate any further. "Power up the lights," Parker ordered, pointing to a switch on the wall outside the cell. Sullivan flipped it, and fluorescent lights flickered on inside the cell. And that's when we saw it. That's when we saw what the Nazis had been keeping down there, what they'd tortured, what they'd tried to kill. The cell was exactly 4 meters by 4 meters. I could see where they'd marked measurements on the walls like a cage at a zoo. Bare concrete, no furniture, no toilet, no water. Nothing except the thing chained in the far corner. And when I say chained, I mean chained. There were restraints everywhere. Around its wrists, its ankles, its chest, its neck. Multiple chains, each one attached to anchor points embedded in the concrete walls, floor, and ceiling. The chains weren't normal. They couldn't have been. The metal was silver-colored, but with these veins of blue running through them. And the blue parts were glowing, actually glowing, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. And every time they pulsed, the thing in the chains would flinch like it was being electrocuted. These chains were designed not just to hold something, but to hurt it, continuously. Whoever built them had wanted to make sure their prisoner suffered every single second of its captivity. But the chains weren't what made me forget how to breathe. It was what they were holding. It was huge. Even hunched over in the corner, collapsed on itself, I could tell it was tall. Maybe 8 feet, maybe more. Hard to judge with it folded up like that. The proportions were wrong for human, too long in the limbs, too narrow in the torso. It was wearing some kind of cloth, like a simple robe, but the fabric was shredded and stained with that dark golden substance we'd seen everywhere in the lab. Blood, I realized. That was its blood. And there was so much of it. The thing's skin, what I could see of it through the torn clothing, was pale. Not Caucasian pale, but actually pale, like marble or alabaster, almost translucent in the harsh fluorescent light. I could see veins underneath, and they were glowing too. That same soft golden light, like there was liquid sunlight running through its body instead of blood. But the glowing was weak, flickering, like a candle about to go out. The thing had its head down, face hidden, and I could see its back, or what was left of its back. There were 2 massive wounds there, one on each shoulder blade, and the wounds were, Jesus, how do I describe this? They were wrong. They looked like something had been torn off, ripped away, leaving these ragged cavities that went deep into the torso. And from those wounds, that golden light was leaking out, dripping onto the concrete floor where it pooled and slowly faded to nothing. But worse than the wounds, worse than anything else, were the things lying on the floor around it. Feathers, hundreds of white feathers, just like the ones we'd seen in the jars in the lab, scattered around the cell like snow. Some were whole, perfect, crystalline structures that caught the light and threw it back in rainbow patterns. But most were broken, crushed, stained with golden blood, like someone had systematically ripped them out, one by one, and just let them fall. Kowalski saw it and immediately brought his rifle up, pointing it at the thing in the corner. His hands were shaking so bad, I thought he might accidentally pull the trigger. "What the fuck is that?" he whispered, but it came out strangled, terrified. "What the fuck is that?" Parker held up a hand, signaling us to hold fire, but I could see his hand was shaking too. We all were. Because even though we'd never seen anything like this before, even though it should have been completely alien to us, something deep in our DNA recognized what we were looking at. Something ancient, something that had been buried in human consciousness for thousands of years, was screaming at us that we were in the presence of something sacred, something holy, something that we should not be seeing with our mortal eyes. The thing hadn't moved since we opened the door. It just knelt there in its chains, head down, golden blood dripping, broken feathers all around it, waiting to die probably, waiting for the execution that was supposed to happen at 600 hours. And then it moved, just slightly, just a small shift of its head, but all 5 of us jumped back like we'd been hit with electricity. It was looking at us now. We couldn't see its face yet, but we could feel its attention on us. And it was like standing in front of a spotlight, like being seen by something that could look right through your skin and bones and see every thought you'd ever had, every sin you'd ever committed, every moment of your life laid bare. I wanted to run. Every cell in my body was screaming at me to run back up those stairs and never stop running. But I couldn't move. None of us could. We just stood there, frozen, as this impossible thing slowly, painfully, raised its head to look at us fully. And that's when we heard the voice. Not with our ears, inside our heads. In English, even though there's no way it should have known English. Speaking directly into our minds with a voice that sounded like music and thunder and the silence after prayer all at once. 3 words. Just 3 words. But they changed everything. Do not fear. Do not fear. That's what it said. Those 3 words, spoken directly into our minds in a voice that wasn't really a voice. And the crazy thing is, the moment it said that, I recognized the phrase. I'd heard it 1,000 times growing up in my father's church. Fear not. Be not afraid. It's all over the Bible. Repeated something like 365 times, once for every day of the year. And it's always what angels say when they appear to people. Always. That's their opening line, their greeting. Because apparently, when humans see angels, the first thing we do is lose our minds with terror. Standing there in that cell, I understood why. This thing, this being, even broken and tortured and chained, even dying, it was still the most terrifying and most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And those 2 feelings, terror and awe, they were so mixed up inside me that I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. And tears were streaming down my face without my permission. And I didn't even know why I was crying. Parker was the first to get control of himself. Military training, I guess. That ability to function even when your brain is screaming at you to shut down. He lowered his rifle slowly, deliberately, and held up both hands to show they were empty. We're American soldiers, he said out loud, even though the thing had spoken in our minds. United States Army, we're not going to hurt you. We're here to help. The thing, the angel, whatever it was, tilted its head slightly, like it was considering his words. And that's when we really saw its face for the first time. I need you to understand something. I'm 80 years old as I'm recording this. I've seen a lot of faces in my life. I've seen beautiful women, handsome men. I've seen newborn babies and saints in paintings and movie stars on screens. Nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for that face. It was human. That's the strange part. It wasn't some alien creature with bizarre features. It was a human face, but it was too perfect. Like someone had taken the concept of a human face and refined it, removed every flaw, every asymmetry, every imperfection, until only the pure ideal remained. The proportions were mathematically perfect, I'm sure of it. The spacing of the eyes, the line of the jaw, the curve of the cheekbones, everything was exactly as it should be, and that exactness made it wrong somehow, uncanny, like looking at a sculpture instead of a living thing. The skin was that same translucent pale, and up close I could see what I'd thought were veins were actually fine channels of light running just beneath the surface, golden light, pulsing weakly like a failing heartbeat. The thing's hair was white, not gray like an old person's hair, but actually white like fresh snow, and it fell past its shoulders in matted, blood-stained strands. But it was the eyes that got me. The eyes that made Kowalski take a step back and cross himself even though he wasn't religious. The eyes that made Doc Martinez whisper, "Holy Mary, Mother of God," like a prayer. Because the eyes weren't eyes, not really. They were light, pure white light where the irises and pupils should have been, glowing softly, and when it looked at you, when that light focused on you, you felt seen in a way you'd never been seen before, seen all the way down to your soul. Those eyes looked at each of us in turn, and I swear to God it was reading us, reading our intentions, our fears, our hearts. When its gaze landed on me, I felt everything I'd ever done wrong flash through my mind. Every lie, every moment of cowardice, every time I'd failed someone who needed me, every man I'd killed in this war, every face, every name if I'd known it. All of it laid out like a book being read at impossible speed. And I knew, absolutely knew, that this being understood all of it, saw it all, judged it all. I wanted to fall to my knees and beg forgiveness for things I'd done, things I'd thought, things I'd failed to do. But the strange thing was, when that gaze moved on to Parker, I didn't feel condemned. I felt understood, like someone had finally seen all of me, the good and the bad, and hadn't turned away. How do you explain that? How do you put into words what it feels like to be truly, completely seen and not rejected? Then my eyes adjusted to the light better, and I saw the rest of it. The wounds. Oh God, the wounds. The thing's robe was hanging in tatters, and underneath I could see its body, and it had been destroyed. There were cuts everywhere, deep incisions that looked surgical, precise. They'd mapped out its anatomy with a scalpel, carved lines and patterns into its flesh like they were taking notes directly on the subject. Some of the cuts were healed over with scar tissue that glowed faintly golden, but others were fresh, still weeping that luminescent blood that dripped down its body and pooled on the concrete. There were burn marks, circular patterns like they'd applied heated instruments to its skin. Chemical burns too, places where the skin had bubbled and melted and never healed right. And there were holes, actual holes, drilled into its limbs, its torso, places where they'd extracted tissue samples or inserted God knows what. Through some of the holes, I could see light moving inside its body, like there were stars under its skin instead of organs. But the worst wounds, the ones that made Doc Martinez cover his mouth and turn away, were on its back. The being was still kneeling, still chained, but it shifted slightly, and we could see its back clearly now. There were two massive wounds there, one on each shoulder blade, cavities that went deep into its body. The wounds were maybe a foot across each, ragged at the edges like something had been torn out, rather than cut. And I realized what they were. Those were where wings had been, where wings should have been. Because there were still remnants there, you could see the bone structure, like the skeletal frame of bird wings, but made of something that looked like crystal or diamond, translucent and catching the light. The bones were shattered, broken off, and from the stumps that golden blood was flowing steadily, more blood than from any of the other wounds. And still attached to those broken bones were a few remaining feathers, white and crystalline, but most of them were bent at wrong angles or broken, hanging by threads of tissue that glowed as they tore. I looked down at the floor around the being and really saw the feathers for the first time. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands, covering the concrete like a carpet of broken glass. Each feather was maybe a foot long, and they weren't like bird feathers. Not really. They had the shape of feathers, the general structure, but they were made of something else, something that looked organic and crystalline at the same time, like someone had grown diamonds in the shape of feathers. The intact ones, the few that weren't broken or crushed, they caught the fluorescent light and split it into rainbows, throwing colored light across the walls of the cell like a prism. But most of them were destroyed, shattered into fragments, covered in golden blood, and you could see drag marks in the blood on the floor where the being had moved slightly and crushed more of them under its weight. Each broken feather felt like a small death, like we were looking at a battlefield of beautiful things that had been systematically destroyed for no reason except cruelty. The chains holding the being weren't normal chains. We could see that clearly now. The metal was silver-colored, but wrong, too light, too perfect, with no signs of casting marks or imperfections. And running through each link were these veins of blue, electric blue, and they were pulsing like a heartbeat. Every pulse, maybe once every 2 seconds, the blue light would surge through the chains, and when it did, the being would flinch. Its whole body would tense, muscles going rigid, and a small sound would escape from it, not quite a gasp, not quite a moan, just this tiny expression of pain that it couldn't suppress. They'd built chains that tortured continuously. Even now, even abandoned and left to die, it was still being hurt every 2 seconds. It couldn't rest, couldn't find relief, just constant rhythmic suffering timed to the pulse of those glowing veins. Doc Martinez was examining the chains without touching them, his medical training overriding his fear. "This is deliberate," he said quietly. "This isn't just restraint. This is a pain compliance device. These pulses, they're probably electrical or something like it, designed to cause continuous nerve stimulation. Whoever built this wanted the subject in constant agony." Kowalski finally found his voice, though it came out strangled. "What are you?" he asked, and I couldn't tell if he was asking the being, or asking God, or just asking the universe in general. The being's head turned toward him, that glowing gaze focusing, and Kowalski made a small sound in the back of his throat like a whimper. The voice came into our heads again, and this time it was weaker, like the being was struggling to maintain the connection. I am a messenger, a watcher. You would use the word angel, though that is not quite accurate. Your languages lack the proper terms. It paused, and another pulse ran through the chains, and its whole body seized for a moment before it continued. I have been here 8 months, 4 days, 13 hours. They sought to extract what I am, to take the light and use it. They failed. They only brought pain, another pulse, another flinch, and I permitted it. That last part broke something in me. You permitted it? I heard myself say, and I couldn't keep the anger out of my voice. You're telling me you could have stopped this? You could have escaped and you just let them do this to you? The being's gaze turned to me, and I felt pinned by it, like a butterfly on a board. I came to watch, it said softly in our minds, to observe humanity at its darkest hour, to witness what you are capable of when you embrace evil. I allowed them to capture me, to test me, to hurt me, because I needed to see how far humans could fall. I needed to understand if redemption was still possible, if light could still exist in a world this dark. Another pulse, another seizure of pain, and then you came. You who have killed, you who have sinned, you who have lost your faith. You came down into hell and chose to help, something you do not understand. That is my answer. Redemption is possible. Light still exists. It exists in you. Sullivan, our quiet Catholic boy who never cursed, who went to confession, who prayed every night, he just collapsed, dropped straight to the floor like his legs had stopped working, fainted dead away, and Parker had to catch him before he cracked his skull on the concrete. That's when I realized we were all crying. Every single one of us had tears running down our faces. Hard men, soldiers, killers, standing in a Nazi bunker looking at a tortured angel, crying like children. Because what do you do when the divine tells you that you're the reason it suffered, that it endured months of torture just to see if humans were still worth saving? And what do you do when it says yes, that you are, that we are? How do you carry that weight? How do you live up to that? I didn't know then. I'm still not sure I know now, 80 years later. But in that moment, in that cell, looking at that broken, bleeding, chained being that had called us light in the darkness, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the war. I felt purpose, and I felt the first stirring of something that might have been faith. We got Sullivan back on his feet, though he was shaking so bad Doc had to hold him steady. The poor kid kept muttering prayers in Latin, fragments I remembered from the few times my father had dragged me to a Catholic service. Sanctus, 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 over and over like a broken record. Parker was trying to maintain some kind of order, some kind of military discipline, but you could see it in his eyes that he was just as shaken as the rest of us. How do you command a situation like this? What's the protocol for finding a divine being chained in a Nazi torture chamber? They didn't cover that at Fort Benning. The angel, because that's what it was, I couldn't pretend otherwise anymore. The angel was watching us with those impossible eyes, waiting, patient despite the pain that had to be coursing through it every 2 seconds when those chains pulsed. And I realized it was weak, not just injured, but fundamentally weak. The telepathic voice we'd heard, it was getting fainter, like a radio signal breaking up. When it spoke again, we had to concentrate to hear it in our minds. Please, I do not have much strength left. The chains, they drain me, have been draining me since they first bound me here. I found my voice, though it came out hoarse. 8 months, I said, trying to process that timeline. You've been here for 8 months. The being's head moved in what might have been a nod. 243 days. October 12th, 1944. That is when they captured me. Its eyes dimmed slightly, like remembering took effort. I was observing. Watching this war. Watching what humans do to each other. The camps, the death, the industrial, murder. I needed to understand why. Why you destroy, what you claim to love. Another pulse through the chains. Another full-body flinch. The Thule Gesellschaft, you would say, Thule Society. They knew fragments, ancient knowledge, old rituals, mostly corrupted, mostly wrong, but enough to sense me, enough to set a trap. Parker, still trying to process this, asked the question we were all thinking. The Thule Society? I thought that was just occult nonsense. Nazi propaganda about ancient Aryan mysticism and hidden powers. The angel's lips moved, might have been attempting a smile, but the expression was pained. Most of it is nonsense. Humans imagining power they do not have. But embedded in the nonsense are truths, very old truths. Your species has encountered mine many times throughout. Your history, each time you write it down, make records, build religions. Most of the knowledge is lost or corrupted, but fragments remain. The Thule members, they found fragments, Sumerian texts, Enochian formulae, blood rituals, from before your written history. Individually, meaningless, together, dangerous, another pulse. This time the angel made a sound, a small gasp that resonated in our bones. They drew a circle, spoke words older than your civilization, and I, curious, descended to see. The trap closed. These chains, they are not of your world. They knew how to forge them, or someone told them how. Doc Martinez, medical curiosity overriding his fear, asked, "What are these chains made of, and what are they doing to you?" The angel's glowing eyes focused on him. "Your science has no name for this metal. It exists between states, partially in your dimension, partially in mine. The blue veins, that is not electricity, though it feels similar. It is antithesis. Your philosophers might call it anti-grace. It unmakes what I am, continuously. Every pulse destroys a small part of my essence, and I must use my remaining strength to rebuild it. An endless cycle of destruction and repair that leaves me weaker each time." The angel paused, and we could see the effort it took to continue communicating. "The chains do not just hold me, they prevent me from accessing my nature. I am, my abilities. They bind me to this physical form and trap me here, like taking a bird and nailing its wings to the ground. It does not die immediately, but it cannot be what it was made to be." Kowalski, who'd been silent since asking what the being was, finally spoke up. "Why didn't you just, I don't know, disappear, teleport, or whatever angels do? You said you permitted this, but why?" The angel's gaze turned to him, and there was something in those glowing eyes that might have been sadness, might have been pity. Hard to read emotions on that perfect, inhuman face. "I told you, I needed to see, to witness how far darkness could reach. The Nazis, they believed they could extract divinity, bottle it, weaponize it. They thought if they could take what I am, they could become gods themselves, immortal, all-powerful. They tried everything." The being shifted slightly, and we heard the clink of chains, saw fresh blood well from wounds we hadn't noticed before. "They cut me open while I watched, took pieces, tried to culture them. All died. They burned me, froze me, electrocuted me, drowned me, starved me. Nothing worked, because I am not made of matter as you understand it. I am purpose-given form, light made flesh. You cannot extract that. You cannot steal it." I don't know why I asked the question. Maybe because I needed to hear it said clearly. Maybe because even after everything we'd seen, part of me was still that skeptical soldier who'd stopped believing in God. But I formed the thought carefully in my mind and directed it at the being. "What are you? Really? Not what we'd call you, but what you actually are." The angel was quiet for a long moment, and I thought maybe it hadn't heard me or didn't want to answer. Then that voice came into my head, clearer than before, like it had gathered its strength for this one explanation. "I am a fragment of the first light, the light that was spoken into existence before your sun, before your stars. I am purpose. I am witness. I am the bridge between what is and what could be. You call us angels, messengers, but we are more and less than your words. We are what remains when love becomes aware of itself. We are what happens when the universe decides to watch its own unfolding." The explanation made my head hurt, like trying to imagine infinity or understand quantum mechanics. It was too big, too abstract, and yet somehow I understood it on a level deeper than words. Sullivan was crying again, but this time they looked like tears of joy. Doc Martinez had his hand over his heart, like he was checking to make sure it was still beating. And Parker, solid, skeptical, by-the-book Parker, he asked the question I should have expected. "Prove it," he said flatly. Prove you're what you claim to be, because right now, all I see is something that looks strange, talks in our heads, and has been tortured until it's half dead. That doesn't make you divine. That makes you a prisoner with unusual abilities. So prove it. Show us something that can't be explained away." The angel looked at Parker for a long moment, and I swear I saw something like respect in those glowing eyes. "You are right. To doubt," it said softly in our minds. "Faith without question is not faith. It is blindness." "Very well. I will show you what little I can through these chains." The being slowly, painfully, raised one arm. The chains attached to its wrist pulled taut, and we could see the metal cutting into its translucent skin, see the golden blood welling up around the restraints. Its hand was shaking with effort, but it managed to turn the palm upward so we could see it. There was a wound there, a deep puncture that looked like it had been made with a spike or a drill. The wound was old, partially healed, but fresh blood was still seeping from it. The angel looked at the wound, then at us, and we felt, rather than heard its voice, "Watch." The wound began to glow. Not just the faint pulse we'd seen in the blood, but a real glow, bright enough that we had to squint. The golden light intensified, got brighter and brighter until it was like staring at a small sun in the palm of its hand, and the wound started closing. We could see it happening in real time, see the torn flesh knitting back together, see the hole in its palm sealing itself from the inside out. It wasn't like normal healing, wasn't scar tissue forming or skin growing back. It was more like the wound was being edited out of existence, like reality itself was being rewritten to say that the injury had never happened. Within 5 seconds, maybe less, the wound was completely gone. Perfect, unblemished skin, if you could call that translucent, glowing substance skin. The light in its palm faded, and the angel turned its hand so we could see both sides. No scar, no mark, nothing to indicate there had ever been an injury there. We stood there, speechless, staring at that healed palm. Then I saw it, the faintest shadow of something appearing in the center of its palm, exactly where the wound had been. A small dark spot, like a drop of ink on white paper. As we watched, the spot grew larger, deeper, and we realized with horror that the wound was coming back, reopening. The flesh was tearing itself apart again, slowly but inexorably, like a film being played in reverse. Within 10 seconds, the puncture wound was back exactly as it had been before, blood welling up, dripping onto the concrete floor. The angel lowered its hand, and when it spoke again, its mental voice was even weaker than before. "These chains, they do not allow permanence. They unmake all that I do. I can heal for a moment, but the antithesis in the metal, it unravels. The healing returns me to this state. This is why I have not escaped, why I grow weaker. Every act, every use of what I am, costs me, and the chains undo it. I am trapped in a moment of suffering that repeats eternally." Doc Martinez stepped forward, and I saw his hands were shaking. "How are you even still alive? 8 months of this, being continuously undone, continuously drained. You should be dead. Nothing could survive that." The angel's eyes dimmed further, and we could barely see the glow anymore. "I am not alive, as you define it. I do not have a body that can die, but I can fade, diminish, become so weak that I can no longer maintain this form. That is what they wanted, to reduce me until I was nothing but pure essence, then to harvest that essence. But I am more stubborn than they anticipated. I chose to endure, to wait, because I believed that someone would come, that even in this, the darkest place, in the darkest time, there would still be humans who chose light." Its gaze swept over all of us. "I did not know. It would be you. Soldiers, killers, men who had lost their way. But perhaps that is better. Perhaps that is the whole point. Who have walked through darkness. That even those can still choose to be light." Parker was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him struggling with something. Finally, he spoke, and his voice was rough with emotion. "The logbook upstairs said you were scheduled for termination at 600 hours this morning. It's after 1400 now. Why didn't they kill you before they evacuated?" The angel's head tilted slightly. "They tried," it said simply. "The Oberfuhrer, their leader, he came with a gun, stood where you stand, put the barrel against my head, pulled the trigger 3 times. The bullets passed through me, left wounds that healed and reopened. He tried stabbing, tried injecting poisons, Nothing worked. So he left me, chained. Thought the chains would finish what he started. Thought I would fade before anyone found me. He was almost right. If you had come tomorrow, I would have been too weak to call out. You would have found only empty chains and scattered light. You came at the last possible moment. That is not coincidence. That is grace. The five of us stood there in that cell, trying to process what we'd just seen, what we'd just learned. An angel, a real, actual angel, chained in a Nazi torture chamber, barely clinging to existence after 8 months of systematic brutality. And we had to decide what to do about it. Parker was the first to speak, and I could hear the conflict in his voice. "We need to call this in," he said, but he didn't sound convinced of his own words. "This is beyond our pay grade, way beyond. We need to get command down here, get the brass involved, maybe some scientists, definitely some chaplains. This is the most important discovery in human history. We can't just..." He trailed off, looking at the angel, at those dimming eyes, at the blood pooling on the floor. "We can't handle this alone." Kowalski nodded vigorously, still pale, still shaking. "The lieutenant's right. We're just grunts. We're not equipped for this. What if we do something wrong? What if we make it worse?" Sullivan, who'd finally stopped muttering prayers, spoke up, and his voice was tight with panic. "We need to leave, right now. This is too much. This is angels and demons and divine judgment, and we shouldn't be here. We shouldn't be seeing this. What if it's a test? What if we're being judged right now and we don't even know it? What if..." Doc Martinez cut him off, not unkindly. "Sully, breathe. You're spiraling." But Sullivan shook his head violently. "No, you don't understand. In Revelation, in the book of Daniel, when people see angels, terrible things happen. Cities burn, people die. This could be the end times. This could be..." He was hyperventilating now, and Doc had to grab him by the shoulders. "Sullivan, look at me. Look at me. That being in there, it's been tortured for 8 months and it hasn't smited anyone. It asked us not to be afraid. It said we were light in darkness. Does that sound like Judgment Day to you?" I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Something was building in my chest, something hot and fierce that I hadn't felt in years. Anger, not at my squad, but at the situation, at the unfairness of it all, at the idea that we'd just walk away. "We can't leave him," I said, and my voice came out harder than I intended. "Are you serious right now? We just found proof that everything we were raised to believe is real, that there's something beyond this meat grinder world, and your first instinct is to run away or hand it off to someone else? We saw what they did to him." I pointed at the angel, at the broken wings, at the chains, at the blood. "We read the logbook. 8 months, 243 days of being conscious through every cut, every burn, every extraction. They tried to make him into a weapon. They tried to steal divinity itself. And you want to leave him here while we go find someone with more authority? How long do you think that'll take? Hours? Days? Look at him, look at him. Does he look like he has days?" Parker's jaw tightened. "I'm not saying we abandon him, Holloway. I'm saying we need proper support. We don't know how to get those chains off. We don't have the equipment. We don't have the knowledge. What if we try to help and we accidentally kill him? What if those chains are the only thing keeping him, I don't know, stable? Contained? We don't know what we're dealing with." I stepped closer to Parker, and I saw his hand twitch toward his sidearm. Instinct, but he didn't draw. "You heard what he said. He's not dangerous. He's dying. And you want to know what I think? I think if we leave him here, if we go back up those stairs and call command, we'll never see him again. The brass will classify this so far above top secret that it'll be like it never happened. They'll move him to some other facility, some other lab, and maybe the people there will be better than the Nazis, or maybe they won't. But either way, we'll have handed a divine being over to the same military-industrial machine that's been grinding up human lives for 4 years. Is that what you want on your conscience?" Doc Martinez, bless him, backed me up. He looked at Parker, and there was steel in his voice that I'd only heard when he was fighting to keep someone alive on the operating table. "I took an oath, Lieutenant, Hippocratic oath. First, do no harm. I swore to save lives, to heal the sick, to help those who are suffering. It didn't specify species. It didn't say only humans, or only Americans, or only people approved by the chain of command. That being in there is suffering. It's dying, and I'm a doctor. So I'm going to do everything in my power to help it, with or without orders." He paused, then added more quietly, "Besides, sir, With all due respect, that thing endured 8 months of hell just to see if humanity was still worth saving. It concluded that we are. Specifically, it concluded that we are, us 5 men, because we came down here when we could have stayed away. If we abandon it now, what does that say about its conclusion? What does that say about us? The angel's voice entered our minds again, weaker than ever, barely a whisper. The decision is yours. I will not compel you. Free will is the greatest gift, the most sacred rule. But you should know, the SS will return. They detected your presence. Radio signals from above. Your man, DeMarco, he called out. They heard. They are coming. Perhaps 2 hours, perhaps less. If you stay to help me, you may die. The Oberfuhrer, he will not allow witnesses, will not allow failure. He will destroy this entire facility before he lets anyone know what was done here. The angel's eyes flickered, almost going dark before brightening slightly again. You should go. Take your evidence. Tell your commanders. Let others handle this. You have families, futures. You have earned your survival. Do not throw it away for me, and that's what decided it for me. That selflessness, that willingness to sacrifice even after everything it had endured. I looked at Parker, and I saw the moment he broke. The moment his military training and his humanity came into conflict, and humanity won. Damn it, he whispered, touching those letters in his breast pocket one last time. Then louder, damn it. All right, we get him out. But we do it fast, and we do it smart. Holloway, you're right that command would bury this, and that angel's right that we might die trying. But Doc's right too. If we walk away now, if we leave him here after he said we were worth saving, I couldn't live with that. I couldn't go home to my wife and kids knowing I abandoned someone who needed help just because it was too risky or too weird or too far above my authority level. He turned to address all of us. Anyone who wants to leave, go now. No judgment. This is beyond any reasonable order. I'm choosing to help him, but I won't order you to. This has to be voluntary. Nobody moved. Kowalski, still pale and shaking, straightened up and checked his rifle. I'm in. My family. The Nazis. They did things to my family. If I can take something away from these bastards, something they wanted, something they tried to break, yeah, I'm in. Sullivan wiped his eyes, crossed himself, and nodded. The Lord works in mysterious ways, right? Maybe we're supposed to be here. Maybe this is why we survived the war when so many didn't. I'm in. Doc was already moving toward the angel, examining the chains more closely. We need to figure out how these work, how they're attached, how to remove them without killing him. I felt something loosen in my chest. Something that had been tight since Normandy. Purpose. Maybe even the beginning of redemption. All right, I said. We have maybe 2 hours. How do we get these chains off? We tried everything we could think of. Kowalski had bolt cutters in his pack. Standard issue for cutting through wire obstacles. He tried them on the chains. The cutters didn't even scratch the surface. The metal, whatever it was harder than anything we'd encountered. Parker tried shooting a chain link at point-blank range. Figured maybe we could blast through it. The bullet ricocheted off, nearly hit Sullivan, and left no mark whatsoever on the chain. That silver-blue metal just absorbed the impact, like it was nothing. We tried prying at the anchor points where the chains connected to the walls, thought maybe we could pull the whole anchor out. The concrete around the anchors might as well have been solid diamond. Nothing we did made even a dent, and the whole time, every 2 seconds, those blue veins pulsed, and the angel flinched, and more golden blood dripped onto the floor, and I could see it getting weaker. Its glow was dimmer. Its mental voice was harder to hear. We were running out of time, and we had no idea how to help. That's when the angel spoke again, and its voice in our minds was so faint we had to strain to hear it. The chains, they documented everything. The Nazis, Oberfuhrer Strasser, he kept records, obsessive records. Every experiment, every measurement, every procedure, including how the chains were made, how they work, how to deactivate them. The angel's head tilted slightly toward the door. Upstairs, the office. Filing cabinets. Third one from left. Technical specifications. Project Fessel. Project Shackle. They had to document it. For Himmler. For the Reich. Everything must be documented. German efficiency. Even in evil. The documents. They will tell you what you need to know. Parker didn't hesitate. Holloway, Doc. You stay here with the subject. Keep it stable. Keep it conscious if you can. Sullivan, Kowalski, you're with me. We're going back upstairs to find those documents. We've got maybe 90 minutes before the SS shows up, and we need to be gone before they get here. Move fast, stay quiet, and if you see anything that looks like technical specifications for chains or restraints, grab it." He paused at the cell door, looked back at the angel. "We're coming back for you. I promise. We don't leave our people behind, and as of right now, you're one of our people. Understood?" The angel's eyes brightened just slightly, and I swear I felt something like gratitude radiating from it. "Understood, Sergeant. I will try to remain until you return." Parker, Doc, and Kowalski headed back toward the stairs, their boots echoing in the corridor. Sullivan stayed behind with me, and we looked at each other, then at the angel, and I think we both had the same thought. We'd just committed to the craziest rescue mission in history. We were going to break an angel out of a Nazi torture chamber, and if we failed, if we died trying, at least we'd die doing something that mattered, something pure, something that might actually mean our lives had counted for something beyond just killing and surviving. I knelt down next to the angel, careful not to touch the chains, and I thought at it as clearly as I could. "Hang on, just hang on a little longer. We're getting you out of here." And I felt its response, weak but clear. "I know. I have faith in you." Parker, Kowalski, and Sullivan took the stairs 2 at a time, their boots clanging on the metal, echoing in that concrete shaft. I stayed below with Doc Martinez and the angel, and the silence after they left was oppressive. Just the hum of the ventilation, the drip of golden blood hitting concrete, and every 2 seconds that pulsed through the chains followed by the angel's barely perceptible flinch. Doc was examining the wounds more closely now, his medical training overriding his fear. "This is impossible," he kept muttering. "The physiology, there's no circulatory system I can identify, no organs I recognize, but it's bleeding, so there must be something. The light seems to function like blood, carrying, what? Energy? Life force? And these wounds should have killed anything 10 times over, but it's still conscious, still aware." He looked at the angel's face. How are you still functioning?" The angel's mental voice was so weak now that I had to lean closer, like that would somehow help me hear thoughts. "I am not biological, not entirely. What you see is interface, a form your minds can comprehend. My true nature is not physical, but this form, it can be damaged, can be diminished. I am not immortal, just very difficult to kill." Upstairs, I heard Parker's voice calling out, "Found it! 3rd cabinet, just like he said." Then shuffling papers, the sound of drawers being yanked open, folders hitting the floor. A few seconds later, Sullivan's voice, high and panicked. "Lieutenant, some of these documents, they're in code. Technical notation I can't read." Parker's response, "Grab everything. We'll sort it out downstairs. Doc can read technical German better than any of us." More shuffling, and then I heard something that made my blood freeze. The distant sound of engines, multiple engines, coming closer. Parker heard it too. "Contact! Vehicles approaching. How many, Kowalski?" A pause, then Kowalski's voice from near the entrance. "I count 3. No, 4 vehicles. Looks like Kubelwagens. At least a dozen men, maybe more. They're half a click out. We've got maybe 2 minutes." I looked at Doc, and Doc looked at me, and we both knew what this meant. They were back. Earlier than the angel had predicted, or maybe our timeline had been wrong from the start. Either way, the SS was here, and we were about to be in the fight of our lives. "Stay with him," I told Doc, pointing at the angel. "I'm going up. If things go bad, if you hear sustained gunfire, you take the back entrance we saw in the lab and you run. Understand?" Doc shook his head. "I'm not leaving you. I'm not leaving any of you." I grabbed his shoulder, hard. "Doc, listen to me. If we all die down here, nobody knows what happened. Nobody knows about him. You're the only one who can tell this story if we don't make it. So if it comes down to it, you run. You find someone, anyone, and you tell them. Promise me." Doc's jaw worked, and I could see him fighting with himself, but finally he nodded. "I promise. But you better not die, Holloway. I don't want to be the one who has to write letters to your families." I took the stairs 3 at a time, rifle in hand, checking my ammunition as I ran. 3 magazines left, 30 rounds each, 90 bullets between me and whatever was coming. When I reached the top, I found Parker, Sullivan, and Kowalski in the office, frantically stuffing papers into their packs. The desk was covered in documents, folders, loose sheets, diagrams. Parker saw me and tossed a heavy folder in my direction. "Technical specs. That's what we need. The rest is just records of their experiments, and we don't have time to sort through it all." I caught the folder and saw the title page. Project Fessel, Technische Dokumentation und Anwendungsprotokolle. Even my rusty German could translate that. Project Shackle, Technical Documentation and Application Protocols. This was it. This was how to free the angel, but there was no time to read it. Through the open door, through the entrance tunnel, I could hear the vehicles getting closer, doors slamming, voices shouting in German, orders being given. Parker made a quick decision. Kowalski, DeMarco's still outside. Get on the radio, tell him to bug out, get to the rally point, radio for extraction. Tell him we found something and we need time. Sullivan, you're on the entrance. Anyone comes through that door that's not one of ours, you put them down. Holloway, with me. We need to read these docs and figure out how to break those chains. We've got minutes, maybe less. Kowalski moved to the radio setup in the corner, started cranking the hand generator to power it up. Sullivan took position behind one of the desks, using it as cover, rifle trained on the entrance tunnel. And Parker and I spread out the technical documents on the floor and started reading as fast as we could. The documents were dense, full of chemical formulas and metallurgical specifications that were way above my education level. But there were diagrams, and diagrams I could understand. The chains were made from something called himmlisch Eisen, celestial iron, which apparently was a compound of materials that shouldn't be able to exist together. Beryllium, osmium, something labeled element 115, which I'd never heard of, and a substance they just called ätherische Materie, ethereal matter, which had no chemical notation at all. The chains were forged using a process that involved both extreme heat and some kind of ritual component that the documents described in disturbingly detailed terms involving blood sacrifice and specific lunar phases. These weren't just chains, they were occult technology. Science and dark magic merged together into something that could bind a divine being. Reading it made my skin crawl, made me want to burn every page and scrub my hands until they bled. But I forced myself to keep reading, to find the important part, the part about weaknesses. And there it was, buried in the technical specifications, a section labeled Strukturschwächen und Notfall decontamination, structural weaknesses and emergency decontamination. The chains, for all their impossible strength, had a vulnerability. The bonding between the celestial iron and the ethereal matter was held together by a specific molecular configuration that could be disrupted. It required two things applied simultaneously: a powerful acid that they'd synthesized in the laboratory, formula listed, and extreme heat focused on the anchor points. The acid would break down the ethereal component, and the heat would cause the physical metals to separate. Temperature needed, at least 1200 degrees Celsius, sustained for 30 seconds. We had to hit all the anchor points at the same time, or the chains would just redistribute the stress and hold. We need the acid from the lab and something that burns hot enough to melt steel, Parker said, already moving. Thermite. We brought thermite grenades for demolition. Will that work? I looked at the specs. Thermite burned at over 2000 degrees. Yeah, that'll work. But we need to move. Now. That's when the first shots rang out. Sullivan's rifle, 3 quick bursts, then a scream in German, then return fire. So much return fire that the sound was like thunder in that enclosed space. I dropped the documents and brought my rifle up just as German soldiers came pouring through the entrance tunnel. Not the handful we'd expected. Dozens of them. SS troops in full combat gear, submachine guns, grenades, coming in like they were assaulting a fortified position. Sullivan got off 2 more bursts before a line of bullets stitched across the desk he was hiding behind, and he had to drop flat. Parker and I opened fire, trying to create a crossfire, trying to slow them down. I saw 2 Germans go down, then a third, but there were so many more behind them. Kowalski was still at the radio, desperately trying to raise DeMarco. Phoenix Actual, Phoenix Actual. This is Phoenix 2. Do you copy? We are under attack. Repeat, under attack. Heavy contact. Need immediate. He never finished the sentence. A burst of MP40 fire caught him in the chest. 3 rounds, center mass, and he was thrown back against the wall. I saw the light go out of his eyes before he even hit the ground. Just like that. Instant. Kowalski, who'd made jokes during artillery bombardments, who'd survived 3 years of this war, who'd told me just yesterday about the girl he was going to marry when he got home. Gone. Dead on the floor of a Nazi bunker while trying to call for help. I screamed something. Might have been his name. Might have been just rage. And I kept firing until my magazine was empty. We were pinned. Completely pinned. Sullivan was behind the desk, not moving, and I couldn't tell if he was hit or just keeping his head down. Parker was behind a filing cabinet that was getting torn apart by bullets, metal screeching as rounds punched through. I'd taken cover behind a concrete support pillar, but it wasn't enough. There were too many of them, and they were advancing, laying down suppressing fire while others moved forward. Professional, coordinated. We were going to die here. I fumbled for a new magazine, my hands shaking, bullets pinging off concrete inches from my head, and I thought about the angel downstairs, still chained, still waiting for us to come back like we'd promised. We'd failed. We'd tried, but we'd failed. I slammed the new magazine home and prepared to make my last stand, to take as many of them with me as I could, when something impossible happened. Every German weapon stopped firing at once. Just stopped. The thunder of gunfire cut off like someone had flipped a switch, replaced by confused shouting in German. I risked a look around the pillar and saw the SS troops looking at their weapons in confusion, working the actions, checking magazines, trying to figure out why their guns had just stopped working. And that's when I felt it. A presence. A wave of something that wasn't heat and wasn't pressure, but somehow both, rolling up from below, from the depths of the bunker. The angel. Even chained, even dying, it was doing something. Protecting us, buying us time. And I realized that if we didn't use this gift, if we didn't act right now, it would have been for nothing. The silence was deafening. 30 seconds ago, the room had been a war zone. Bullets everywhere. The sound of automatic weapons fire so loud it hurt your ears even through the adrenaline. Now, nothing. Just confused German voices, the mechanical clicking of weapons being cycled over and over, and the sound of my own heart hammering in my chest like it was trying to break through my ribs. I looked at Parker across the room, and he looked at me, and we both had the same expression of complete disbelief. What the hell just happened? The SS troops were still there, still in firing positions, still aiming at us, but their weapons weren't working. None of them. I watched one soldier eject his magazine, check it, slap it back in, pull the charging handle, aim at Sullivan, pull the trigger. Nothing, not even a click. The firing mechanism just wouldn't engage. Another soldier tried to throw a stick grenade, pulled the cord, and the fuse just didn't light. He stared at it in his hand like it had betrayed him, then threw it anyway out of frustration. It clattered across the floor, rolled to a stop, didn't explode. These were professional soldiers with well-maintained weapons, and suddenly every single piece of military equipment they had was refusing to function. That's when I saw the light. It started as a faint glow coming up the stairwell from the lower level, golden and warm, like sunrise, but it was getting brighter, fast. The Germans saw it too, and I heard fear in their voices now. That particular note of panic that soldiers get when they encounter something they can't explain, something that doesn't fit in their understanding of how the world works. The light intensified, grew brighter, started to fill the stairwell, and then it emerged into the office level. Not as beams or rays, but as this visible field of energy, like looking at heat shimmer off pavement on a hot day, except this shimmer was golden and it was spreading. It rolled across the floor like fog, climbed the walls, filled the space between us and the Germans, and wherever it touched, weapons stopped working completely. I saw an SS officer trying to work the slide on his Luger, and when the golden light washed over him, the gun just fell apart in his hands, literally disassembled itself, pieces clattering to the floor. Other weapons did the same. Rifles, submachine guns, grenades, all of them just ceased to function, and some of them actively came apart like they were being unmade. The voice hit our minds like a thunderclap, not the weak, fading whisper we'd been hearing before. This was power. This was what the angel sounded like when it wasn't being drained by those chains, when it stopped holding back, when it chose to act. Run. Take what you need from the laboratory. Finish the process. I cannot hold this much longer. The voice wasn't just in our heads. It was in our chests, in our bones, reverberating through our entire bodies. I felt my teeth vibrate. I tasted copper. And I understood with absolute clarity that the angel was doing something it shouldn't be able to do. That even with those chains draining it, even dying, it had reached deep into whatever power it had left and was protecting us. But it was costing everything. I could feel that too, like the light itself was its life burning away. Parker didn't hesitate. He grabbed the folder with the technical specifications, shoved it in his pack, and ran for the stairs. "Sullivan, Holloway, move, now!" Sullivan scrambled out from behind his desk, grabbed Kowalski's rifle and ammunition, and followed. I took one last look at Kowalski's body, at my friend lying there with blood spreading across his uniform, and I made a promise to his corpse. I will make this count. Your death will mean something. Then I ran. We hit the stairs at full speed, taking them 3 and 4 at a time. Parker in the lead, Sullivan in the middle, me bringing up the rear with my rifle trained back on the office level in case the Germans recovered faster than expected. Behind us I could hear shouting, officers trying to restore order, someone screaming about Teufel and Hexerei, devil and witchcraft. They were terrified. Good. We hit the laboratory level, and Doc Martinez looked up from where he was kneeling next to the angel, relief flooding his face. Thank God. I felt something, like an earthquake, but not. And then I heard the voice telling you to run, and I thought, he saw our faces, did a quick head count. Where's Kowalski? Parker's voice was flat. Dead. We don't have time. Doc, the laboratory. We need acid. Specific acid. He yanked the folder out and found the page with the chemical formula. Showed it to Doc. Can you synthesize this from what's in here? Or is it already made? Doc grabbed the paper, studied it for 3 seconds, then moved to the shelves full of chemical bottles. This is incredibly toxic, designed to break down exotic matter. They've already made it, they had to for the experiments. Should be labeled. He was scanning bottles frantically. Here, Etherauflösung, ether dissolution. This is it. But the specs say we need heat too. Extreme heat applied to the anchor points. I was already pulling the thermite grenades from my pack. We carried them for destroying equipment, for making sure artillery pieces or vehicles couldn't be recovered by the enemy. 2 grenades, each one capable of burning through an engine block. Will these work? Parker grabbed one, examined it. Temperature rating is over 2000 Celsius, more than enough. But look at this diagram. He showed us the paper with the chain configuration. We need to hit 6 anchor points simultaneously. 3 in the wall, 2 in the floor, 1 in the ceiling. If they don't all release at the same time, the stress redistributes and we fail. We need 6 people applying heat at once, and we're down to 4. He looked at each of us. Sullivan, Holloway, Doc, and me. We're 1 short. That's when the angel spoke, and its voice was weak again. The power it had expended to protect us upstairs clearly taking a massive toll. I can release one from inside the ceiling anchor. It connects to my restraints. If you handle the others, I can break that one. But you must work together. Precisely. The acid first, then the heat. 30 seconds. Sustained. Can you do this? Doc was already moving, taking the bottle of acid, carefully pouring it into smaller containers. We need something to apply it with, something that won't dissolve. He grabbed some kind of glass syringes from the medical supplies, started filling them. These should work. Glass is chemically inert to most acids. Parker was dividing up the thermite grenades, showing us how to arm them, how to position them. These have a 4-second fuse once you pull the igniter. We pull them simultaneously, place them against the anchor points, and get back, way back. Thermite splatter can burn through flesh and bone. We moved into the cell, stepping carefully around the blood and broken feathers. The angel was slumped against the wall, its glow so dim now that we could barely see it even with the fluorescent lights on. It had given everything to protect us, and it was fading fast. We had to work quickly. Doc went to each anchor point with the acid, carefully injecting the liquid into the seams where the chains connected to their anchors. The acid hissed and smoked on contact, and we could see the metal starting to corrode, the blue veins pulsing erratically like a heart in arrhythmia. It's working, Doc said. The ethereal component is breaking down, but we need to move fast. This acid is also highly volatile. If it reaches critical mass before we apply heat, it could explode. Great. Just great. So now we're working with acid that might blow us up while SS troops are recovering upstairs. This was fine. Everything was fine. Parker positioned me at 1 floor anchor, Sullivan at the other. He took 1 wall anchor, Doc took another, and we had to leave the 3rd wall anchor and the ceiling anchor to the angel itself. Can you reach those 2? Parker asked it. The angel shifted slightly, chains clinking, and managed to position 1 hand toward the ceiling anchor and brace its feet against the wall anchor. Yes, but once the chains begin to fail, I may not be able to control the release. There will be energy discharge. You should take cover. Parker nodded. Understood. On my mark, we pull the igniters, place the thermite, and get behind the doorway. Angel, You do what you need to do with yours. Ready? We all nodded. My hands were shaking as I held the thermite grenade. One shot. We had one shot at this. If we failed, the Angel died. And probably we died too when those SS troops got their weapons working again. 3, 2, 1, mark! We all pulled the igniters simultaneously. 4-second fuse. I slammed my thermite grenade against the floor anchor and dove backward. Sullivan did the same. Parker and Doc placed theirs and ran for the doorway. And the Angel, with the last of its strength, reached up and grabbed the 2 anchors it could reach. For a moment, nothing. Then all 6 points ignited at once. The thermite burned with a light so bright it was like staring into the sun. White-hot, magnesium bright, turning the cell into a furnace. I felt the heat even from behind the doorway, felt my skin tightening, smelled my hair singeing. The anchor points glowed red, then yellow, then white, and the chains started to crack, not break. Crack. Fractures appearing in the impossible metal, spreading like lightning. The blue veins going haywire, pulsing so fast they were almost solid blue. And from the Angel came a sound. Not a scream exactly, more like music played backwards, like thunder rolling up from the depths of the earth, like the fundamental vibration of the universe suddenly made audible. It was beautiful and terrible, and it made my nose bleed. Then everything happened at once. The chains shattered. All of them, simultaneously, exploding into fragments of silver and blue that scattered across the cell like shrapnel. The Angel collapsed forward, no longer held upright by the restraints, and hit the concrete hard. The golden light that had been leaking from its wounds suddenly blazed, not fading but intensifying, and the wounds started closing. Fast. Faster than the demonstration in its palm had been. The holes sealed up. The burns faded. The cuts knitted themselves back together. And from its back, from those terrible wounds where its wings had been torn away, something started to grow. Not full wings. There wasn't enough time for that, or maybe not enough strength. But the crystalline bone structure extended, and new feathers began to form, small and fragile but growing, like watching a time-lapse of a flower blooming. The Angel tried to stand, stumbled, caught itself against the wall. Its eyes were blazing now, that white light so bright we had to look away. When it spoke, the voice in our minds was clear again, strong. Thank you for choosing light. Now we must go. They are coming. And right on cue, we heard it. Gunfire from upstairs. The distinctive sound of MP40s. The Germans had gotten their weapons working again. Whatever the Angel had done to disable them, it had worn off. We heard boots on the stairs. Multiple sets, coming down fast. Parker grabbed the Angel's arm to help stabilize it, and his hand passed right through the translucent skin like it was grabbing fog. How do we... The Angel shifted, became more solid, more physical. Better. Parker nodded, got a grip, and started hauling the Angel toward the door. It was heavy, or light, or both somehow, hard to describe, like carrying something that existed in more dimensions than I could perceive. Sullivan, take point. Holloway, rear guard. Doc, stay with our guest. There's a back exit through the laboratory. Leads to a service tunnel that comes out half a click from here. We get to the rally point, call for extraction, and get the hell out of Germany. Move. We made it maybe 20 feet down the corridor before the first German soldiers appeared at the far end, coming down the main stairs. They saw us, saw the Angel, and I watched their faces go through a whole journey of emotions in about 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, horror. One of them started screaming, just incoherent screaming, dropped his weapon and ran back up the stairs. The others opened fire and we ran. Bullets sparked off the walls behind us, ricochets whining past our heads. Sullivan fired back without looking, just point shooting to keep their heads down. We crashed through the laboratory, past the horrible jars and instruments, and found the door the Angel had mentioned. Heavy steel, but not locked. Parker slammed it open and we poured through into a service tunnel, bare concrete, emergency lights flickering, and we ran. Behind us, muffled by the door, we heard more gunfire, more shouting, and then something else. An explosion. A big one. The whole tunnel shook, dust raining down from the ceiling. They're demolishing the facility, the Angel said, its voice strained. Strasser's final order. If they cannot have me, no one can, and no evidence can remain. The tunnel shook again, harder this time. Run faster! We ran through that service tunnel like the devil himself was behind us, which wasn't far from the truth. The explosions kept coming, each one closer than the last, and chunks of concrete were falling from the ceiling. The emergency lights flickered and died, plunging us into darkness except for the angel's glow, which was getting stronger, but still not what it should have been. 8 months of torture doesn't heal in minutes, even for a divine being. The tunnel sloped upward, and I could feel fresh air starting to mix with the stale bunker atmosphere, which meant we were getting close to the exit. Behind us, the sounds of pursuit, boots on concrete, German voices shouting orders. They weren't giving up. They'd lost their prize, their divine captive, and they were willing to die to get it back. Or more likely, they knew what Strasser would do to them if they returned empty-handed. Either way, they were coming hard and fast, and we were running out of tunnel. The angel stumbled. Its legs just gave out, and it went down hard, hitting the concrete with a sound like breaking glass. The partial wings on its back, those fragile new feathers that had just started growing, they shattered on impact, fragments of crystalline structure scattering across the floor. The angel made a sound, half gasp, half something that might have been a sob, and tried to push itself back up. Failed. Its arms were shaking with effort, and I realized that even though it had healed the worst of its wounds, it was still fundamentally weak. 8 months of being continuously drained had left it with nothing. It was running on fumes, on willpower alone, and that was finally running out. I am sorry. I cannot. Sullivan and I grabbed it, one arm each over our shoulders, and hauled it upright. And that's when I experienced something I still can't properly explain. The angel had weight. Definite, physical weight. But it also didn't. It was like carrying something that existed partially in our dimension and partially somewhere else. Heavy like carrying a person, but also light like carrying air. And my brain couldn't reconcile the contradiction. My muscles knew it was heavy, were straining with the effort. But my sense of proprioception, my awareness of where my body was in space, it said I wasn't carrying anything at all. It was deeply, fundamentally wrong, and it made me nauseated. "Keep moving!" Parker shouted from behind us. He'd taken up position at a bend in the tunnel, using it as a choke point, firing controlled bursts back the way we'd come. I could hear the Germans returning fire, bullets sparking off the walls, and Parker grunting with effort as he changed magazines. "I can hold them here for maybe 30 seconds. Get to the exit. Get him to safety. That's the mission now." Doc Martinez was beside him, not fighting, but sorting through his medical pack, and I realized he was preparing supplies, field dressings, morphine, the stuff you give to someone when you know they're not going to make it, but you want their last minutes to be as comfortable as possible. "Doc, what are you doing? We need to move." Doc looked at me, and there were tears running down his face. "I'm staying with Parker. Someone needs to hold this position, buy you time to get clear, and someone needs to—" He gestured at Parker, and that's when I saw it. Blood. A lot of blood, spreading across Parker's shoulder, down his arm. He'd been hit. When? In the laboratory? In the cell? I hadn't even noticed. Parker saw me staring and tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. Caught a ricochet somewhere back there. Didn't want to say anything, didn't want to slow us down. But it's bad, Holloway. I can feel it. Something important got hit. I'm not making it out of here. He fired another burst, dropped another German. But you are. You're going to take our guest to safety. You're going to tell people what happened here, what we found, what the Nazis did. And you're going to make sure my wife knows. His voice cracked. You're going to tell Sarah that I died doing something that mattered, that I didn't die for oil or territory or politics. I died saving something pure, something good. Can you do that for me? I wanted to argue, wanted to say we could carry him out. We could all make it, but I'd seen enough wounds to know. Parker was dying. We had minutes at best, and every second we delayed, the Germans got closer. I'll tell her, I said, and my voice sounded strange in my own ears, hollow. I'll tell her you were a hero, that you saved something that should never have suffered, that you gave your life so that light could escape darkness. Parker nodded, satisfied, and turned back to his firing position. Doc Martinez looked at me one last time. When you tell the story, tell them about Kowalski too. Tell them he died calling for help, trying to save his brothers. And tell them, he paused, touched his medic's cross. Tell them I finally understood my oath, that life doesn't mean human life. It means all life, everything that can suffer, everything that can hurt. That's what we're supposed to protect. Then he turned away, picked up Kowalski's rifle from where Sullivan had dropped it, and took position next to Parker. Two good men, preparing to make their last stand in a collapsing Nazi bunker so that the rest of us could live. Sullivan and I hauled the Angel forward, moving as fast as we could with the awkward weight. Behind us, the sound of Parker and Doc opening fire, controlled bursts designed to make the Germans think twice about rushing the position, then something heavier. A grenade, maybe. Screaming in German. Another explosion from deeper in the complex. Bigger this time, and the whole tunnel shook so hard we almost fell. The main charges, the Angel whispered in our minds. They are destroying everything. The laboratory, the records, the evidence. This entire section will collapse in minutes. We saw light ahead. Real light. Moonlight. The exit. We pushed harder, legs burning, lungs screaming, and burst out of the tunnel into the forest. Fresh air, trees, stars overhead. We'd made it out, but we couldn't stop. I looked back and saw smoke pouring from the tunnel entrance, heard more explosions rumbling underground, and then the worst sound. Gunfire from inside the tunnel, getting closer. The Germans had broken through Parker and Doc's position. Or maybe Parker and Doc had run out of ammunition. Or maybe... I didn't let myself finish that thought. Sullivan, we need to move. Now! We crashed into the forest, no trail, just heading away from the bunker as fast as we could. The Angel was trying to help, trying to move its legs, but it kept stumbling. I am sorry. I am slowing you down. You should leave me. Save yourselves. Shut up, Sullivan gasped. With all due respect to your divine nature, shut up. We didn't come this far. We didn't lose Parker and Doc and Kowalski just to leave you in the woods. You're coming with us, if I have to carry you on my back. The forest was thick, and it was dark, and we were making way too much noise. Every broken branch, every stumbled step, every labored breath, it all sounded impossibly loud in the night. Behind us, I heard German voices, flashlights cutting through the trees, dogs barking. They'd brought dogs. Of course they'd brought dogs. We couldn't outrun dogs. The Angel must have sensed my despair because its voice came into my head, stronger than before. Left, 30 degrees. There is a stream. Water will hide your scent. 50 meters. We changed direction, crashing through underbrush, and found the stream exactly where the Angel said it would be. We splashed into it, the cold water soaking through our boots, and started moving downstream. The dogs got closer, then suddenly stopped, confused barking, the handlers shouting. We'd lost them, at least temporarily. We moved through that forest for hours. The Angel guided us, whispering directions into our minds when we reached forks in the terrain. Right here. Avoid that clearing. There are patrols. This path leads to a village. Allied controlled, 6 kilometers. Its voice got weaker as we went. The effort of maintaining consciousness, of providing guidance, of simply existing, taking its toll. But it kept going, kept directing us, kept us away from German patrols that we heard but never saw, kept us moving towards safety. Sullivan and I were beyond exhausted. My legs were lead. My arms felt like they were going to tear out of their sockets. But we kept going. We'd lost 3 men getting this Angel out of that bunker. 3 good men who'd chosen to sacrifice themselves. We couldn't let that be for nothing. The sky was starting to lighten in the east when we finally saw it. A village. Small. Maybe 20 buildings. And American flags. I almost cried with relief. We'd made it. We'd actually made it. We stumbled into the village, and sentries immediately challenged us. Rifles up. Flashlights in our faces. Identify yourselves, I tried to answer, but my voice wouldn't work. Too dry. Too tired. Sullivan managed to croak out, Phoenix actual survivors, need medical, and then the Angel, who we were still supporting between us, who hadn't said anything out loud the entire time, spoke. Actually spoke, with a physical voice that sounded like music and thunder. Please, help them. They saved me. They are heroes. The sentries saw what we were carrying. Saw this impossibly tall, glowing being with torn wings and blood-stained robes, and one of them just dropped his rifle. Dropped it and fell to his knees and started praying. The other one, to his credit, kept his weapon up but shouted back toward the village. Sergeant of the Guard, we need the captain. We need... I don't know what we need. Just get everyone. People came running. Soldiers, a medic, an officer. They surrounded us, trying to help, trying to understand what they were seeing. Someone tried to take the Angel from us, and I found myself snarling at them. Don't touch him. Don't you dare touch him. We carried him out of hell. He's ours. The officer, a captain with gray in his hair, held up his hands. Easy, soldier. We're here to help. What's your unit? What happened? Where are the rest of your men? I opened my mouth to answer, to tell him everything, but the words wouldn't come. Too much, too big. How do you explain that we found an angel in a Nazi torture chamber? That we broke him out? That 3 of our men died so he could be free? That everything we thought we knew about the world was wrong? The angel saved me from having to answer. It raised one hand, touched my forehead, touched Sullivan's forehead, and I felt peace, just for a moment. The exhaustion and pain and grief, it all faded into the background, replaced by calm. Rest, the angel's voice said in my mind. You have done enough. You have saved me. Now let others help. And then its eyes dimmed, its glow faded, and it collapsed. Just went completely limp between Sullivan and me, and we barely managed to lower it to the ground before it hit. The angel was unconscious, maybe dying. I didn't know. But we'd made it. Against impossible odds, against Nazi soldiers and collapsing bunkers and 8 months of torture, we'd freed an angel and brought it to safety. Parker, Doc, and Kowalski hadn't died for nothing. Their sacrifice had meant something, had saved something precious. And as I finally let myself collapse onto the muddy ground of that village as consciousness started to fade, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt like maybe, just maybe, God was real, after all. And maybe he'd been watching. Maybe he'd been helping. Maybe we'd been part of a plan bigger than ourselves. Maybe there was still hope in this nightmare world. And then everything went black. 2 weeks. That's how long we kept the angel hidden in that abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the village. 2 weeks of lying to officers, of filing false reports, of claiming that Sullivan had been killed in action when really he deserted 3 days after we arrived. Just walked away one night without a word. Couldn't handle what he'd seen. Couldn't reconcile his Catholic upbringing with the reality of what we'd found. I don't blame him. Part of me wanted to run too, but I'd made promises to Parker, to Doc, to Kowalski. I'd promised their deaths would mean something, so I stayed. DeMarco stayed too, thank God, because I couldn't have done it alone. He'd been our outside man, the one keeping watch when we went into the bunker, and he'd seen us come out of the forest carrying something impossible. He'd helped us hide the angel, helped us lie to command, helped us figure out what the hell we were supposed to do next. Between the 2 of us, we managed to keep anyone from discovering what was in that warehouse. The warehouse had been a supply depot before the Germans abandoned the village. Concrete floor, metal roof, big enough to hide a truck, big enough to hide an angel. We set up a cot for it, brought in medical supplies that DeMarco requisitioned from the aid station, smuggled in food even though we weren't sure if it ate. It didn't, as it turned out. The angel didn't need food or water or sleep the way we did. What it needed was time. Time to heal. Time to recover from 8 months of systematic destruction. And slowly, so slowly, it started to improve. The first few days it barely moved, just lay on that cot, glowing faintly, occasionally making sounds that might have been pain or might have been something else. The wounds stopped bleeding after day 3. Started actually closing. Real healing instead of that temporary fix the chains had always undone. By day 7, the angel could sit up. By day 10, it could stand. By day 14, it could walk, though it moved carefully, like everything still hurt. The wings were growing back. That was the strangest thing to watch. The crystalline bone structure would extend a little bit each day, and feathers would form along the framework. Not fully formed at first, just these tiny filaments of light that would gradually solidify into those impossible crystal organic structures. By the end of the 2nd week, the angel had maybe 1/3 of its wings back. Not enough to fly, probably, but enough that you could see what they were supposed to look like. Beautiful. That's the only word. They were beautiful in a way that made your chest hurt, in a way that made you understand why every culture in human history had depicted angels with wings. Not because wings were practical for divine beings, but because wings were the only way our limited human minds could express the concept of something that could transcend physical limitation. These wings, even partially formed, they looked like stained glass and spider webs and fractals all at once, catching the light from our lanterns and throwing rainbow patterns across the warehouse walls. We talked to it at night, DeMarco and I. Couldn't sleep most of the time anyway. Too many nightmares about the bunker, about watching Kowalski die, about the sound Doc's rifle had made when it finally went silent. So we'd sit with the angel, and it would talk to us. Not always out loud. Sometimes the telepathic voice, sometimes that physical voice that sounded like music. It told us things about itself, about its kind, about the nature of reality that made my head hurt trying to comprehend. One night, maybe day 9 or 10, I asked the question that had been eating at me. You said you came to observe, to watch humanity at its darkest hour. Why? Why would you subject yourself to that? Why not just stay, wherever you came from, and avoid all of this? The angel turned those glowing eyes on me, and I felt that familiar sensation of being read, being understood all the way down to my core. We are witnesses, it said softly. That is our purpose, has always been our purpose. Before your species existed, before your sun ignited, we watched, we observe, we record, we bear witness to what is. That is the fundamental nature of consciousness itself, James. To observe, to be aware. We are, you might say, the universe's way of watching itself unfold, but we do not interfere, cannot interfere. Free will is sacred. It is the only rule that cannot be broken. We can watch, we can guide in subtle ways, we can appear at moments of crisis to offer choice, but we cannot force, cannot compel, cannot save you from yourselves. It shifted on the cot, wings rustling. But the Nazis, they were doing something unprecedented, industrializing murder, turning genocide into bureaucracy, taking the worst of human nature and making it efficient. I needed to understand how that was possible, how beings capable of love and art and sacrifice could also build camps where they murdered children. So I came, I watched, and when they captured me, I let them, because I needed to see, needed to experience firsthand what you are capable of when you embrace evil completely. I felt anger rise in my chest. So you're saying you chose to be tortured, chose to suffer for 8 months. That's insane. That's masochistic. Why would any rational being do that? The angel's expression, that perfect, inhuman face, it shifted into something that might have been sadness. Because bearing witness to suffering is not enough. To truly understand, I needed to participate in it, to feel it. Your species learns through experience. We are not so different. I could watch the camps from a distance, see the smoke from the chimneys, count the bodies. But numbers are abstract, distant. To understand what the Nazis were doing, to truly comprehend the depth of their evil, I needed to be in the position of their victims, needed to feel what it was like to be treated as an object, as a thing to be studied and broken and discarded. It paused, and its glow dimmed slightly. It was worse than I anticipated, far worse. There were moments when I questioned whether your species was worth saving, whether the experiment of free will had failed, whether mercy and compassion were evolutionary dead ends that would be bred out by those who chose power and cruelty. But then we came, DeMarco said quietly. He'd been mostly silent during these conversations, just listening, but now he spoke up. You said that's why you endured, because you were waiting to see if anyone would choose to help you. The angel nodded. Yes, that was the test. If evil could organize and commit atrocities on an industrial scale, could good do the same? Could compassion survive in the darkness? Or would everyone, when faced with the unknown, the terrifying, the impossible, choose safety over courage? Choose to walk away rather than risk themselves for something they did not understand? Its eyes focused on me. You answered that question, James. You and Marcus and Antonio and Michael and John. You could have left. You had every reason to leave. I was alien to you, strange, potentially dangerous, and you had families waiting at home, futures to return to. But you chose to help anyway, chose light even after you had walked through darkness. That is what convinced me. Not miracles, not displays of power, but choice, moral choice made by imperfect beings who had every excuse to do otherwise. That night, the angel offered to show me something. Would you like to understand? It asked. To see what I see? I can share a vision with you, a glimpse of the pattern. But I warn you, mortal minds are not designed to comprehend eternity. It may hurt. It will certainly change you. You cannot unsee what I show you. I looked at DeMarco and he shrugged. I'll pass, thanks. I'm good with my regular limited perception of reality. But I nodded. Show me. I need to understand. Need to know that Parker and Doc and Kowalski, that they died for something real, something that matters. The angel reached out, placed one translucent hand against my forehead, and I saw. God help me, I saw. It wasn't images exactly. It was more like understanding being downloaded directly into my brain. I saw the moment the universe began, but not as an explosion, as a choice, a decision by something infinite to limit itself, to take on boundaries, to create space and time and matter. I saw the earth forming, saw life emerge from chemical reactions that weren't random but weren't designed either. Something in between, something that transcended that duality. I saw humanity arise, saw us spread across the planet, saw us develop language and art and science and cruelty, saw every moment of human history at once, the good and the evil braided together, inseparable. And I understood something fundamental. Free will wasn't a gift given to us by some external God. Free will was the fundamental nature of existence itself. The universe chose to be, and everything in it inherited that choice, that capacity to decide, to select one path over another. That's what made us in the image of the divine, not our form, our freedom. And I saw the cost of that freedom. Saw every act of cruelty, every murder, every moment of suffering that free will made possible. Saw the Holocaust from above. Saw the camps like scars on the earth. Saw the souls of the murdered rising like smoke. And I felt the angel's grief, its doubt, its near despair at what we'd done to each other. But then I saw the other side. Every act of courage, every moment of sacrifice, every time someone chose love over fear, chose compassion over cruelty, chose to help even when helping cost them everything. And I saw that those moments, those choices, they resonated. They sent ripples through reality that touched lives we'd never meet, created chains of causation that spread forward through time. Parker's choice to help the angel, even knowing it would cost his life, that choice would echo, would inspire, would matter, not just to us, not just now, but forward through decades, through centuries. And Doc and Kowalski, their sacrifices were the same. They'd chosen light in the darkness, and that light would never fully fade. When the vision ended, I was crying, actually sobbing, tears and snot running down my face like a child. I couldn't remember the last time I'd cried, maybe when I was 7 and my dog died, but certainly not since joining the army, not through Normandy, not through Bastogne, not even when I watched my friends die. I'd been frozen, empty, but this understanding of how the universe worked, of why suffering existed, of what our choices meant in the grand pattern, it broke something open inside me. The angel withdrew its hand and waited patiently while I ugly cried for maybe 10 minutes straight. DeMarco just sat there, uncomfortable, occasionally patting my shoulder and muttering, "It's okay, buddy. Let it out." When I finally got control of myself, the angel spoke again. "Now you understand why I permitted the torture, why I endured. Because I needed to answer the question, can light survive in the deepest darkness? And you, James Holloway, you and your friends, you answered yes, definitively. And that answer matters, will always matter." I wiped my face, tried to compose myself, and then I asked the question I'd been afraid to ask. "Parker, Doc, Kowalski, where are they now? Is there really something after death? Or is this it?" The angel was quiet for a moment, and I saw something like kindness in those inhuman features. They are aware. They persist. Not as they were, not with memories and personalities intact as you would understand it, but the essential pattern of who they were, the choices they made, the love they expressed, that continues. They see the full pattern now, understand what their sacrifice accomplished, and they wait for you, James. Wait for you with pride and joy, because you carried the burden they left behind. You honored their deaths by completing the mission, by keeping me alive, by choosing to care for something broken and alien. They know this, they feel this, and when your pattern joins theirs, whenever that may be, you will understand as they understand, will see as they see, and the reunion will be beyond words. I felt something in my chest, a physical pain that had been there since getting shot during the Battle of the Bulge. Old wound, mostly healed, but it ached when it rained, throbbed when I overexerted. I'd learned to live with it. The angel noticed me rubbing the spot. "You were injured there?" I nodded. "Bullet. Went clean through but cracked a rib on the way. Field medic patched me up, but it never quite healed right." The angel reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted. I didn't. It placed its palm flat against my chest, over the old wound, and I felt warmth spread through my body. Not painful, comfortable, like sitting next to a fire on a cold day. The pain, that constant dull ache I'd been carrying for months, it just disappeared, faded away like it had never existed. The angel removed its hand, and I looked down. My shirt was still on, but I could feel something different, something changed. I pulled my shirt off, looked at my chest in the lantern light, and saw it. The scar was gone, completely gone. But in its place was a mark, a small mark, maybe 2 inches long, right over my heart, shaped like a wing. A single wing, with individual feathers you could trace with your finger. "Consider it a reminder," the angel said softly. "A reminder that you were seen, that your choice mattered, that you saved something worth saving, and a reminder that you carry light inside you, James. You always have. You just forgot for a while. Don't forget again." On the morning of the 15th day, I woke up in the warehouse, and the angel was gone. Just gone. The cot was empty. The blankets we'd given it folded neatly at the foot. The medical supplies were organized, unused bandages stacked in perfect piles, and on the concrete floor where it had been lying, there was a pattern, made of light, or maybe burned into the concrete, hard to say. A pattern of wings, spread wide, with feathers so detailed you could count them. But when I blinked, the pattern faded, until I couldn't tell if it had ever really been there, or if I'd imagined it. DeMarco and I searched everywhere. The warehouse, the village, the surrounding forest. Nothing, no trace, no footprints, no sign of where it had gone or how it had left. It was like the angel had just ceased to exist in our dimension, had stepped sideways into somewhere we couldn't follow, and I felt abandoned, which was stupid, right? We'd saved it, done what we set out to do. It didn't owe us anything, but part of me had hoped for a goodbye, for some acknowledgement that what we'd done mattered, for closure, I guess. But then I felt it. A presence in my mind, familiar now after 2 weeks of communication. The angel's voice, but different. Not from outside, from inside, like it had left something behind, embedded in my consciousness. And I heard words that I still hear to this day, 80 years later. Words that I can recall with perfect clarity anytime I choose to remember them. "James, DeMarco, thank you. Thank you for seeing me when I could not be ignored, for choosing compassion when cruelty would have been easier, for risking everything when you owed me nothing. I cannot stay. My presence here endangers you. The governments of your world, they would seek me, imprison me, study me, perhaps more gently than the Nazis, but prison nonetheless. And I will not be caged again. But I leave you with this. Tell the story. When the darkness seems to be winning, when evil appears triumphant, when people lose faith that good exists at all, tell them. Tell them that light survived in the deepest hell, not because it was strong, not because it was powerful, but because you, broken and bleeding and faithless, chose to carry it out. That is the truth. That is what matters. And remember, I watch still. All of my kind, we watch, and we remember. Every choice for good, every act of courage, every moment of love in the face of hate. We see it, we record it, and it matters more than you can possibly understand. That was it. That was the last communication I ever received directly from the angel. The voice faded, but the message stayed, burned into my memory like words carved in stone. DeMarco felt it too. We never talked about it much, but I knew. We both knew we'd been changed by what happened in that bunker, changed by what we'd seen, changed by the choice we'd made. We filed our official reports, heavily edited, of course, said we'd encountered enemy resistance, lost 3 men, destroyed a Nazi research facility. The brass accepted it. Why wouldn't they? It was the end of the war. Everyone was filing reports. Everyone had lost people. Ours didn't seem particularly unusual. But DeMarco and I, we kept the real evidence. The photographs we'd taken, the documents we'd smuggled out, the folder with the technical specifications for the chains. We split it up, kept it in different locations, insurance policies in case one of us died, and the other needed to prove the story was real. And then we went home, tried to have normal lives, tried to forget. But you can't forget something like that. You can't see an angel and then just go back to your regular life like nothing happened. I tried. God knows I tried. Went back to Texas, married a good woman, had 3 kids, worked construction for 40 years, went to church every Sunday, tried to be a good man, tried to honor the sacrifice Parker and Doc and Kowalski had made, but the memories never faded. And the mark on my chest, this wing-shaped scar that shouldn't exist, it never went away. I showed it to doctors over the years, showed it to specialists. Nobody could explain it. The tissue was wrong, they said. The cellular structure didn't match any known type of scarring. It looked like it had been grown from the inside out, like my body had decided to create this shape on purpose. One dermatologist, this was back in the 70s, he wanted to biopsy it. I let him. He called me a week later, sounded shaken, said the sample he took had disintegrated in the lab. Just broke down into light, he said. Actual light. He asked me where I'd gotten the mark. I told him I didn't remember. He never brought it up again. And the feeling, that's the part I've never told anyone until now. Every time I do something good, every time I help someone, every time I choose kindness over cruelty, compassion over apathy, I feel something. It's like a warmth in my chest, right where the mark is. Like someone is watching, like someone is pleased. I used to think I was crazy, that the trauma of the war had broken something in my brain and I was experiencing some kind of psychosomatic response. But it never went away. 80 years. 80 years of feeling that presence, that awareness, every time I make a choice that matters. And I started to understand something the angel had tried to tell me. We're not alone. We've never been alone. Something is watching. Something cares. Not intervening, not controlling, but witnessing. Bearing witness to every small act of courage, every tiny choice for good. And somehow, impossibly, that matters. I kept in touch with DeMarco over the years. Letters at first, then phone calls, then emails when we got old enough to figure out computers. We never talked about it directly, not in writing, too afraid someone might intercept the communications. But we'd call each other, especially on April 6th, the anniversary, and we'd talk in code. You still have that souvenir from Germany? Yeah, still have it. Still feels the same. And I knew what he meant. He felt it too. That presence, that awareness, that sense of being watched by something benign. In 1989, DeMarco called me. His voice sounded weak, told me he had lung cancer, terminal, maybe 3 months left, and he said something I'll never forget. Jimmy, he said, and his voice was thick with emotion. I've been carrying this for 44 years, wondering if we were crazy, if we imagined the whole thing, if it was battle fatigue or trauma or some kind of shared delusion. But I'm dying now, and I need you to know, I still feel him. Every day, every time I do something good, I feel that warmth in my chest. I feel like someone's watching and smiling. We weren't crazy, Jimmy. It was real. It's still real. And when I die, when I cross over, I know Parker and Doc and Kowalski will be waiting. I know it. Not because of faith, because he showed us. He let us see. We know what comes after, and I'm not afraid. DeMarco died 2 weeks later. I flew out to California for the funeral. His kids were there, his grandkids, none of them knowing what their father had really done in the war, what he'd seen, what he'd saved. I wanted to tell them, wanted to say that their dad was a hero, not just because he'd fought Nazis, but because he'd chosen compassion when he could have chosen safety. But I couldn't. The words wouldn't come. How do you explain something like that to people who hadn't been there, who hadn't seen? So I kept quiet, shook hands, offered condolences, and felt utterly alone. The only person left who knew the truth, the last survivor of something that should never have been kept secret, but had to be. And now it's 80 years later. 80 years since I was a 28-year-old sergeant who'd lost his faith, who thought God was dead or disinterested or non-existent. 80 years since I found out I was wrong. I'm dying now. The doctors confirmed it 3 days ago. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, spread everywhere. Nothing they can do. Days left, maybe a week, and I've decided I'm done keeping the secret. I'm done protecting institutions that buried the truth because it was inconvenient. I'm done living in fear that someone will silence me. Let them try. I'm dying anyway. What are they going to do, kill me faster? So I'm telling you, all of you, whoever you are, wherever you are, this happened. In April of 1945, in the Black Forest of Germany, 5 American soldiers found an angel in a Nazi torture chamber. 3 of them died to save it. 2 of us survived. And the angel, before it left, told us that our choices mattered, that light can survive in the deepest darkness, that we're not abandoned, that something is watching, something cares. I'm looking at the mark on my chest right now, pulling my shirt down so you can see it on the camera. This mark that's been here for 80 years. This wing-shaped scar that no doctor can explain. This proof that I'm not crazy, that it really happened. And I'm telling you, I feel it right now. That warmth, that presence, like he's here, like he's watching me make this video, like he approves. Because this is the right time. The world is dark again. Not Nazi dark, maybe, but dark. People are losing faith, choosing cruelty, embracing hate, and they need to know, they need to remember, that even in 1945, even in the worst moment of human history, there were angels, there was light, and there were broken, faithless men who chose to save it. If we could do it then, you can do it now. You can choose compassion. You can choose courage. You can be light in darkness, and something will be watching. Something will remember. I promise you that. My hands are shaking worse now. The pain is getting harder to ignore, even with the morphine. I don't have much time left. Maybe hours, maybe less. The hospice nurse will be here soon, and she'll make me rest, and I might not wake up again. So let me say this clearly, while I still can. My name is James Holloway. I was a sergeant in the 101st Airborne Division. In April of 1945, I was part of a team that rescued an angel from Nazi captivity. Marcus Parker, Antonio Martinez, and Michael Kowalski gave their lives to complete that mission. They were heroes. They made a choice that mattered, and I've spent 80 years carrying the weight of that choice, the responsibility of being the one who survived. If this video reaches you, if you're watching this, then it means I'm gone. It means the evidence I've kept hidden is being released. The photographs, the documents, the proof. Look for it, verify it, investigate it, and then remember, the war never ended. The battle between light and darkness, between compassion and cruelty, between love and hate, it's still going on. Every day, every moment, in every choice you make. But the side of light never gives up on us, never abandons us. Even when we abandon ourselves, even when we lose faith, something is watching, something remembers, and your choices matter more than you can possibly imagine. Choose light. Please, choose light. The video image shakes violently. James Holloway grabs the desk to steady himself, his face contorting in pain. His breathing becomes labored. He reaches for something off camera, probably medication, but his hand falls short. He looks directly into the camera one last time, and there are tears streaming down his weathered face. But he's smiling, actually smiling, like he can see something the camera can't, like he's greeting an old friend. He opens his mouth to say something else, but no words come out, just a soft exhalation. His eyes unfocus. The camera keeps recording for another 30 seconds as James Holloway slowly slumps forward, his hand still pressed against the wing-shaped mark on his chest. Then the screen goes black. Official record: James Walter Holloway. Born March 15th, 1917. Died November 10th, 2024. Cause of death: pancreatic adenocarcinoma, stage 4. Medical examiner's addendum: Dr. Alan Chen, Chief Medical Examiner, Travis County, Texas. During the routine autopsy of James Walter Holloway, a mark was observed on the decedent's chest, positioned directly over the heart. The mark measures approximately 10 centimeters in length and bears a striking resemblance to a wing with individual feather-like structures. Tissue analysis of this mark revealed several anomalies that I am unable to explain within the parameters of known medical science. The cellular structure of the marked tissue does not correspond to any recognized form of scarring, tattooing, branding, or surgical modification. The cells appear to be organized in a crystalline pattern that should not be possible in organic tissue. When examined under electron microscopy, the tissue exhibited a faint luminescence that cannot be attributed to any known biological or chemical process. Most disturbingly, when a sample was removed for further analysis, the tissue degraded within 12 hours, leaving behind nothing but a faint light residue that our equipment could detect but not measure. The pattern of the mark appears to have been formed from within the body, with cell modification extending approximately 4 mm deep into the chest wall. This is inconsistent with any external marking method. The tissue appears to have been reorganized at a cellular level, as if the DNA itself was rewritten to create this specific pattern. I have been practicing forensic pathology for 32 years. I have never encountered anything like this. I have no explanation for this mark's origin, composition, or purpose. For the official record, I am classifying it as unexplained anomalous tissue formation. But off the record, I don't know what this is, and that terrifies me. The mark was photographed extensively before the body was released to the family for burial. Those photographs are being sealed with this report. I recommend any future researchers approach this case with both scientific rigor and an open mind. Something happened to James Holloway, something that left a permanent, unexplainable change in his body. What that something was, I cannot say. I can only document what I observed and admit the limits of my knowledge.